kids taking testing.
Oh, good.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to our meeting.
Try this again.
Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor? Mr. Merritt?
JV girls varsity basketball coach Brian Cleary, and we're going to be sad to see this next person go due to retirement. Lori Cabral will be retiring from Picasso.
I know it. She did such a wonderful job. Thank her. And the kids loved her and all the staff. Thank you so much. And for the lovely letter she wrote. That was so nice. Correspondence?
Periodically, Chartwell's our food service provider, updates me with a memo, so for informational purposes, I just included that Chartwell's memo in the school committee's package. I really didn't have any additional comments to add.
Thank you.
And Diane Sanders and I will be attending that meeting. They talked about it right again, remember, for the health and wellness. So we'll give you a report if we get back. So when the reps come in, we'll put them on, but they're on their way, okay? So, what should we take next, Mr. Aaron?
So do you want to start on the budget and come back to it, or take care of the other minor?
You want to take care of 5A and 6B, and then maybe they'll
Yeah, they
get
shouldn't,
B and
they shouldn't
Or
take that
5B and 6B, thank you. I'll make a motion to move up 5B and 6B.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay.
I'm seeking committee approval for the wireless contract with Envision. As you recall, before Christmas, we came to speak to the committee saying that we were awarded the grant and that Bride had given us a series of steps that we had to take. The first step was to negotiate the contract with the vendor. It has been vetted by Attorney Robinson, and he says it's okay for the committee to approve. He saw no problems with it. If approved, Al will call the vendor tomorrow. They will start getting everything ready, and work should begin by the end of this month.
And this is what you expected, Al?
You're
Okay.
On target, there's
Okay.
nothing I'm alarmed about or anything.
You're comfortable with everything in there?
I'm comfortable with, they expect to have it finished by July 1st, everything should be completed.
Okay.
It's an at-will contract, I see.
It is.
Sort of, okay. I mean, that's how most are, I'm just,
I wouldn't start the process over again unless it was something drastic.
okay, thank you. Okay, so do I have any motion?
I make a motion to approve the contract.
Second.
Any questions from anybody? No? All those in favor?
Thank you. No, we'll get that out starting tomorrow.
Okay.
Doug, you want to do the trust dividend?
Sure, 6B.
Mhm.
Thank you. Included in your package was a memo from the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust, who we procure our health insurance from, and it was a very good year for Tiverton, both the school department and the municipal side of the government. In the memo, it itemizes and details a special dividend, which is the first of its kind since we've been involved with the trust. And because the trust had a very good year in terms of its claims versus premiums, the board of the trust voted to have a special one-time distribution of premiums back to the participants. So what that means for Tiverton is we had, the trust divided the dividend into two components, a fixed and a variable piece. The fixed was determined partially through the fiscal year, and the variable was determined based on the full year of results.
6B.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just let us catch up.
Okay.
You don't have it?
Continue.
Sure. So on page 2 of the 4-page memo, you can see the itemized portion of what's allocated to the town and to the school department. So in total, we had a dividend of $325,653. Below that, it describes the manner in which the trust will either pay us or credit our account. So So the reason I put this in the package for this meeting is to notify the school committee what the options were and how much the dividend was. And if you notice on the bottom of page 2 also, there's a date of February 15th where we have to actually let them know how we want to handle this. So I would recommend the committee review that. We can certainly discuss it this evening, but we do have a little bit of time to determine how we want to apply the proceeds.
So the 325,653 is our piece?
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
And what would you recommend?
Well, I think we need to discuss that as part of
Budget?
the budget.
Oh, okay.
As the whole,
It's
my
part of-
recommendation,
yeah.
it's tied to how we handle the
Right,
Other
whether we
items.
want to pull it
The
out
good news
once,
is that
yeah,
we have additional
funds.
funds to offset costs, or, to place, the committee may decide, put it back into our carry forward so that we can address other issues.
To keep it for other things?
For other items, so it's very good news.
Yes.
So it's a return because our health pool,
Claims were lower than the
we're,
premiums.
Yes, by 0.1%. That's a lot of money to get for
That actually
0.1%
is only the
less.
variable portion, so the fixed portion is more reflective of the lower claims overall, which is, let's see, in that paragraph, it's comparing 76.3 to 76.4. That was their estimate a few months ago, and it came in very close to the estimate. So the variable piece didn't change too much from the original estimate. The fixed piece we knew about. So I think the original estimate I had for variable was around 80,000 or something. So there was some slight flexibility based on that 0.1, but overall it didn't change.
so they've never done this before, but we essentially wrote them and said, hey, we've been paying in, and
It's not just us, it was the pool
the
in
the
general.
collaborative.
Yeah.
And the collaborative wrote and said, we've had some very favorable experience, so we feel we should get some of the money
Sure,
that,
it's
okay.
They actually have, it's a complicated process, and it took a while to actually iron it out. They have to make sure that the reserves for the pool in general were sufficient to
Right.
cover any claims that may be out there, and there's a lot of actuarial work that goes into that. And even after they fully funded the reserves, there was a surplus, and they really hadn't been in that position before, and the consensus was, let's return it to the participants. And
So this isn't going to be something that
can't-
that
This is
either
a-
we or the
This is a-
taxpayers should be,
no, this is a
anticipate
one-time-
having come in every year. This is
This is
sort
a
of
one-time revenue stream.
okay.
And that's why they're giving you the option of, in essence, banking it, because this year I'm not anticipating a very high increase in health insurance. It's about an average year, as we discussed at last meeting. So maybe next year we would get a 10 or 11% increase. You could potentially use some or all of this to offset.
So
a
would
higher
we
increase.
bank it with them essentially?
That's,
It's
yeah,
fine,
that's what
okay.
they described. They've
I know,
created
I
a
should
pool
read it, but
to-
just asking you.
And actually, the version of this that I received, that I put in the package, was only 4 pages. There's a larger package that actually explains the pool in the form.
So,
to let
so
them know
our
how to
options that
handle
we
it.
should consider is bank or to take it?
Or
Now,
split it and take a portion of it.
Now, if we
Right.
take
Or
it,
split.
you can take it,
Okay.
and then just use it to offset your costs next year. I mean,
True,
Yeah.
6 one way,
absolutely.
half a dozen another.
And I almost would rather have it
case
than
they
to have
change
them
their
holding it and say, we'll use it for health
Because
insurance.
I'm going to recommend that, again, that we pay for many of those capital items,
Right.
move our
So that was good.
I mean, even if you don't use it, I would rather that we physically
I would
have
rather
the
have
money
it.
Yeah.
Well,
than
and they
have
allow
them
you an
holding it.
option of actually taking a credit on this year's health insurance, and it basically would flow to our balance.
True.
Or taking a credit on next year's
Right.
renewal.
But because
Yeah.
we're in a pretty decent position right now,
We would take
I
either
would say
take a
we,
credit
I would
next year.
recommend that we take.
So those are kind of the options,
Right.
bank it
Right.
or take
Yeah,
a
and
credit
Because
essentially.
there are a few options, and we probably need to discuss it, I want to give at least a
Yep.
cycle or two of
That's good,
meetings
yeah.
to,
So
for the
think
committee
about
to
it.
think about it.
And you're on that,
She's on the
board?
executive.
You're on the board?
So
Okay.
what's our total annual premium? We're getting $325,000 back, right?
It's close to almost 4 million.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna
it's
say, if
it's
it's
pretty high
1%.
percentage-wise.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
We have been, had a been very fortunate. We had 1 year of premium decrease and another year of about a 0. So the last 4 or 5 years have been very favorable as part of that pool.
So we'll think about it and come back to you.
Certainly.
Well, I guess, yeah, we'll discuss it as we discuss the budget.
Yes,
Go
that's the
along.
best way to handle it, I think. And again, it's not in anything, it's not on the backup data or anything.
Right.
It's just
It's certainly good news.
Stand up.
Have it out there.
Yep.
That's good, thank you.
I'm going to make a motion that we move up 6A.
Second.
All those in favor?
Jay and Lou, that would be you.
We moved
And
you
Wally.
up.
We moved you up. Oh, and Wally, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Wally
Mr.
Wally
Keeler.
just came in.
I guess they can just sit in the front rather than stand.
Yeah, you want to
I'll just sit in the front?
You want
I've
to
been sitting all day, I don't mind it.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll stand.
I don't know what to do.
We look like a bunch of politicians.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Okay, we just invited you here, as we always do, to kick off the season of your season and our budget season, to show everyone how we collaborate and work together, and to give you some of our thoughts, and maybe you could tell us if there's anything about education that you see on your horizons. And then if we officially vote on something, we always send it to you. And if it's really serious, of course, we'd ask you to come back, and you always have. But we just wanted to show the community how we work together and how important that partnership is, because we can't do this without you, because you're the General Assembly's the school committee of the state, as we all know. So,
I actually have some very specific things, but are there things that you guys are that you know that you're going to bring up for education?
Well, generally, I think what's going to happen is that the governor's coming out with his budget
tomorrow,
and his
Wednesday.
State of the State address tomorrow, so we'll be able to react a lot better to what his tentative proposals are. And then, as you know, after that process takes place, there's the finance committees, both on the Senate and the House, that will review those budget proposals and go through each of those proposals along with any other type of legislative agenda. And basically what we work on, which is the November and the May revenue estimating conferences, which are probably the most important aspects because those generate what we call our general revenue expenditures. And based on that, we know how much money we have in to put forward in terms of many increased in state aid. The November general revenues were 45 million more for this year projected and 50 million for next year's projected budget. So the governor was working off those figures, but then again, you have to remember that May would be the final revenue estimated conference.
So from the education perspective, there's a few things. One bill that's already been submitted is the teacher notification date. Moving that from, it's a proverbial, 6 years I've done it now, we like to think this is the year it's going to move over the goal line.
Seventh time is the charm, right?
6, yes. I think that's the number, 6. So moving from March 1st to June 1st, all the notification dates. What you should expect to see again this year is a continuation of full day K. The pilot program that began this year, moving half day K to full day K, there were 4 that were moving forward, given some pilot money to be able to figure out how to make put the program in place. And we're also working to, because the way the program works now, you're getting a piece of the funding next year, and it's graduated through the rest of the funding formula over N number of years. Unlike the average daily student attendance, you'd get that money based on last year, the numbers you have. Well, from a K perspective, we're trying to figure out how do we get, if you're a school system that's moving from half-day K to full day K, how do you get that money next year?
Right.
It's the right thing to do to get it
That's
to you
right.
next year.
Well, because if you know they're going to have them,
Yeah.
obviously
Right.
they're going to have them in the system. Okay.
Correct. So the challenge
So you're
becomes-
working on, like, the formula to see some
Yes.
way to, okay.
Whether it's the formula, whether it's part of the categorical accounts, that's a piece as part of that as well. I'm sure you heard about the governor and the board looking to split itself up or identify 2 different councils. Whether that's going to be in the budget or not, I don't know. The policy statement, we'll see what that has, how that affects K-12 and how does it affect higher ed. We'll see. And I think the last couple things associated with the race to the top. So race to the top finishes this year, I believe, in this time frame.
Yes.
So based on, we have to figure out what RIDE's going to do, that would be in the budget as well for those initiatives, or whether they're going to continue or not continue those. So we'll ask you to take a look at that to say what should be supported, what shouldn't be supported. Uncertain what the governor will have in there based on what the commissioner as proposed, which is what's going to be brought forward.
A lot of that money didn't come to the district, so, okay.
So how do, and obviously the last piece that's, that I've talked to a couple of you last year, and we're working to get some data on now, I know I am anyway, in preparation for what we're going to hear the end of this month. The first part of February is all associated with the kneecap results. It's coming out, I think it's the
25th.
25th. The Department of Education indicated at the meeting last night, that's what I was told today. So based on what those results are, I'm trying to gather data now of what the results were last year and all the work that was done. And since that test was taken, all the work districts have done to help those students, the 4,000 students, 1,000 of those I think are in Providence, to help those students become partially proficient, to help meet the grade, so to speak. I probably saw in the paper the other day about the various waivers, at least one set of waivers that are in place with regards to admitting to college in a non-rolling admission college, in a non-community college. So if a college has non-rolling admissions, four-year college, that could be a waiver requirement, or waiver if the student didn't necessarily meet the requirements of partially proficient. So I think other than what Wally said from a numbers perspective, I don't see much yet. Obviously, this is our, fourth day in session, so.
You know, I knew I shouldn't have let the two senators talk first. They sucked all the air out of the room already.
No, come on, Jay, there's plenty left.
No, the kneecap,
I hope so. We've got a long night.
the kneecap scores are actually something the House is really interested in. We had a closed caucus this afternoon, and one of the items that came up amongst the caucus was how the kneecap scores are going to affect the districts, how they're affecting the students in them. So as a body, I know we'll be looking at how they are going to work out. And we also have a guest coming before the joint session next week.
It's soon.
Yeah, it's either next week or the week after for her annual report on education to the General Assembly. So we'll be getting her ideas on where she's going for the next year.
The only other piece I was going to mention as well, the housing aid moratorium. Here's the good thing if the General Assembly does nothing. If the General Assembly does nothing, the housing aid moratorium ceases. So the housing aid comes back into effect. Senator Pearson, I'm not sure if it's a Senate-only task force, but Senator Pearson and a few other, Senator Adriano, I believe, is on it as well.
Yes,
And
I know.
some other folks are part of a task force looking at housing aid in general. Don't know the charge or the objective of the commission, but they have some meetings, another meeting this week, I think.
Yeah, Senate only.
Now, as far
Yes,
as that
it's not a
housing
joint-
aid
joint
goes,
commission.
Representative Edwards and Mr. Fiore and I appear every year to try to get our 40% instead of the 30%.
35.
What does that equal?
You have
30.
35.
For the
We have
town?
30%.
200
I
something
think if we were successful, it would be
35.
between 200,000 and 300,000 extra for the town.
for the town every year. That would
Yeah, it's
be-
like $250,000 just to the town. And we're one of very few
There's not
that are
many
still
that
out there,
don't.
at only 30%.
Although
Right.
maybe if they're going to, as Mr. DePalma noted, that if the moratorium's going to be up, this might be a good year to say, okay, now you're going to be giving out more money, so we need to at least
That's
make
right.
Tiverton and the other, I forget who it was, at least we need to bring them up to what everybody else was getting.
That's right.
Because now people are going to be applying for new money, and it's not really fair that only 2 or 3 communities.
Right. It's a good time, I think, you know.
Well, Representative Canary and I already introduced that bill, so
Oh,
it's in again.
And I brought the chart in front that you can see
Yep.
the proportion that comes from the state and the federal government and local. And that's why you can see why Tiverton, Portsmouth, all those towns are where we are, because it all comes from local, mostly. Although it's been more from the state recently, a little bit better for our aid, which is good. We appreciate that.
The challenge with the housing aid has been really 3 communities that drove the numbers. Providence,
Right, of course.
Pawtucket, Central Falls. Providence was at Central Falls was at 92.5%. Providence was at 80-something%. A lot of schools, a lot of construction costs.
Yeah.
Drove some
And
numbers.
some got, they got the 80%, and we got the 30.
When we put our budget together, we used the funding formula that RIDE provided to us about a month ago. Do you feel confident that that will be funded at that level for the fiscal year 15?
At least that level this year. Depends on what the governor does tomorrow, but I would assume you're going to get at least that amount of money.
Because we're one of the communities that is theoretically behind, so I think they're spreading our increase. We don't have all of what the formula says right now. We're getting it over the next 4 years, I believe.
Yeah, any of the losers that were needed to gain was still over that 10-year period or whatever it was.
But you're confident that the number that Ryan put together about a month ago should be something we can rely on?
Well, we'll know factually tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow will be the initial big push in terms of what proposals the governor has, how that breaks out from a financial perspective. And then we kind of go into a little bit of a lull, so to speak, in terms of legislation, because now the individual bills start to get submitted, and they may, impact the school committee in one way or another, an educational system. And usually what happens is that the House has their own education committee and the Senate does, so a lot of times there'll be matching bills, and the chairperson would get all those bills and usually not have hearings until maybe the end of February, when he or she can get common bills together and have hearings on those common bills. So I would have the community, the school committee look out for those particular groupings of bills that start maybe the end of February on each to the House and the Senate, those types of bills that may have a fiduciary impact on the school committee or not. I know myself personally, I submitted a bill that got passed a couple of years ago regarding concussions and the importance of concussions and recognizing those concussions from a coach's perspective. The Interscholastic League has approached me to try to expand that a little bit more, to also provide a educational component to teachers, because as you know, teachers are an important part of that particular process for a concussed student, because of the fact that they see that person in the classroom and should be aware of that, and should be aware of any signs that they may see from that particular student. So there may be a initial bill put in terms of maybe providing a sort of educational type seminar type thing that maybe lasts a half hour or an hour to assist that teacher and maybe in that recognition aspect of it.
So what would you need this year for legislation?
Well, I think Sally mentioned hers, and you'll have to indulge us a little bit, because I don't think we haven't taken a vote or discussed kind of what we would like to see. So I think, just based on some of the initial discussions, definitely kneecap, I think, is a concern for all of us, especially given that the waivers now, seems to be pretty arbitrary at this point.
Right, kneecap as a graduation requirement,
Yeah.
and the constant changes made to the process as it's gone forward. It's been impossible to plan well for, because it wasn't planned well at the state level.
If I could just, I think actually the concept of high-stakes testing in general is, I think kneecap is on everybody's radar right now, because that's the sword hanging over our heads, or over the students' heads. But I think the idea of high-stakes testing, depending on how well you've actually devised the system and then supported it and validated it, can really be educationally suspect. And right now, I don't think that there is a really good appreciation of that on the part of the commissioner and the executive branch, and that the people that we hear from in the, in open meetings here, really are suspicious of it and see what's going on. And I think so far there hasn't been a lot of oversight that either the people or the school committees, or I guess the legislature, have been able to exercise over what RIDE is doing in that regard. And that, I think, is something that I'm happy that it's sort of part of your agenda and sort of something you're aware of, because I think it really is going to come to shove. And it's not just kneecap, it's PARC,
Agree.
it's sort of what we're doing to the educational system in order to sort of satisfy this idea that it's all about the testing and the test result, without really looking at the infrastructure and saying that the infrastructure is what drives the test result. So that.
Yeah, we're very concerned, because certainly the kneecap is fatally flawed as far as the graduation requirement is fatally flawed as far as I'm concerned, but there's also a lot of concern because we're building curriculum, we don't have materials for curriculum, we don't have funding from the state, so we're having to fund it. You know, we have math and ELA curriculum that we haven't even started, and you're going to start an assessment or a high-stakes assessment to measure that. So it would be nice, and again, we haven't discussed this, so we'll need to and bring forward if, you know, some sort of resolve or something, but some sort of moratorium or pause in this high-stakes or assessment testing where we don't have the infrastructure in place, we don't have the curriculum in place, we don't have the materials in place, because all you're doing is you're setting the kids up to fail.
And I worked in Massachusetts, and Carol did also during the ed reform. I went back in '93, that's when it started. And it took them 10 years. And this is what they did. They hired the teachers in the summer to come and work on the curriculum for the testing. It was all in with them. They spent so much money. And then they did it very cautiously and carefully for 10 years. And so I went to a meeting in Somerset the other day. The Commissioner of Education from Massachusetts was there, because I went with Linda Larson. I said, they're always comparing us to them. Let's go see what they're doing. Why don't we turn our eyes and say, let's look? And he stood there and he said, let me be very clear. I'm putting a pause on the exit test, the high-stake park exit test, before we find out if the kids have the capacity. Think about it. They play on a computer, but do they use a keyboard? Can they show us how much they know through that? Well, wouldn't it be sad if a kid was brilliant and you never knew it because he started crying? He's like, I don't know, this isn't a test. That's what they say. I don't know what I'm doing. And so we've been going all around. We go to every meeting we can to get all sides. We went to Rhode Island school committees and got our certificate for Common Core. We went the other night to the Elks because the one person that didn't sign off, there were 2 people that didn't sign off and one that didn't sign off, was there to tell why she didn't. And we're trying to get first-hand knowledge before we make any decisions, you know. But I think it's really serious. I've never seen such a serious time in education, because if we're going to jump right into park now and test the kids and say you can't graduate when we don't even have the materials yet, it's a whole different way of learning. It's investigations, and it's amazing. And I've been in education since 1967. I've never seen anything like it. It's very serious. It's a crisis. We cannot do this to the children and the parents. And we went up the other night to the commissioner's thing. Deb and I went to support our principal and our superintendent, our curriculum director, because we're all in this together. And we sat there, and they that night announced a new waiver policy. Excuse me. I was like, wait a minute. Some of these kids thought they weren't going to graduate. Maybe on the basis of that, they wouldn't apply to college. You guys know how much it costs and all the different things. Now they're supposed to be applying right now for their aid. We know that February. I had 6 kids go to college, January and February. They missed all that. That could have been a way out for them. And I know a lot of kids, personally. And it's data for them. It's not for us. Kids walk up to me in the hallway, crying and shaking, Mrs. Black, can you please help us? This is real for these kids and for their parents. This is very, very serious. And I know a lot of kids who do everything. They're on student council or in the band, and they're in football, and they're well-rounded students. And at a time when the SAT isn't being looked at anymore, when my kids went, if it wasn't a certain thing, you were in the trash. Now they're saying, well, look at that, but we'll look at multiple measures on that level. We're going backwards saying, never mind multiple measures, we're just looking at that. So if a kid's not good in one subject, in one test, and he does all these other things, and he's so amazing, you're going to tell him he can't graduate? And where's he going to go there? He's going to be stuck. So this is really an emergency. This is very, very serious, and we're trying to be reasonable, and we're trying to look at all the areas, and we're not afraid to be challenged. We're not afraid to be tested. We have the top school, one of the top schools in the state. It has nothing to do with that, so don't come back and tell us that's not what it's about. It's not even about tests. We don't mind being measured and the teachers being evaluated, but not by one thing to say you can't get out.
I think even if you disagree and say we need a high-stakes test, the way that this one has been manipulated and changed, and you have really incomprehensible why waivers for AmeriCorps, but not if you get into the military. I mean, there's just no sense to it anymore. So even if you believe in high-stakes testing, I think that the kneecap and the way that the process and the way that it's just manipulated and been changed, it's just no longer valid. The park argument, again, even if you believe in high-stakes testing, and that's an argument to be had, we're not ready. Even not just for our 11th graders, but for our 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, you have to give us time to build curriculum. You have to give us time to build infrastructure. So I guess, I mean, we can talk about it and do some sort of resolve at the next meeting, but if you could let us know when hearings of that sort are coming, or where would we look? Because you're busy. I don't expect you to be my...
Well, Representative Canary is on the House Education and Welfare, so I'm sure I'll let him know, because he wasn't able to make it this evening, to...
Or look at that calendar?
He'll
Is that
look ahead
really
the
what we
calendar.
should be
Yes,
doing?
the calendar.
And I sit on Senate Education, so I'll try and let you know. The interesting part, when we had about, I'll say, 6 hours of testimony last year, when we heard the kneecap, just remember, we started about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and we ended about 11 o'clock. We had one school committee person from North Smithfield, I think. She happened to be there for another bill earlier, so she stayed. That was the only person that we...
We'll stay all night.
No, I'm saying, that's the only...
You
So it's
tell
one of
us
those
what
where...
it is.
The gate in this will be, or not a gate, but a step will be that when the facts and data come back at the end of this month, what's it telling us?
Right.
And we can't just look at the facts and data on the surface, then got to peel back and say,
I just asked when you go up there, keep in mind, the kneecap goes away.
correct.
So the question of whether kneecap is valid or not is almost irrelevant in the sense of moving forward.
Because we're moving on to park.
Because now you're looking
With
at
the
a more
Common Core.
challenging assessment in this park assessment.
Yep.
Well, the ELA math goes away. We still have the science, but
Right.
it's
Well,
not a
the ELA
graduation
math,
requirement.
correct.
Again, it really, I think, comes to, the idea of high-stakes testing, and I agree with Mrs. Palish. It's certainly something that you can believe in, and it's certainly a discussion or argument that can be had. The problem is that we've really put the cart before the horse by not really building the curriculum that supports the high-stakes testing, so that we're actually measuring something that we've really done. All we've done, really, is measure something that we may or may not have done over the last
Well, that
couple
we're in the
years.
process of
Or that we're
trying
in
to.
the process
We're in
of
the process of doing.
But at the same time, making that an extremely loaded event in the lives of the children and the family and the community, ultimately. And the part of this also is, I think, a sense of frustration on the part, certainly, of school committees, certainly parents, and certainly every teacher I've spoken to, as a lack of sort of consultation, not consultation in the sense that they're going to do what we tell them to do, but really assessing, what is the teacher's experience, what is the student's experience, what is the school committee's experience on the part of RIDE and the commissioner, to see what really is going on the ground about all of this. I think she knows what we feel or think, but I don't get the sense that they're taking that into account.
And, and just finally, Mrs. Black, I think, summed it up quite well as far as the impact on the children and the families. From a finance standpoint, it's an unfunded mandate. Because all the curriculum work that we have to do, and every district has to do, isn't just writing something up and handing it out to teachers in paper form or electronic form. It's materials, it's training. There was no money for districts like ours under Race to the Top for these things, as we didn't qualify. And now with the park movement, this is our second year, we're now doing our ELA curriculum. Everything, and we're going to be talking about it later tonight, how do we support our teachers? That's all money that's coming from the local tax, from us, from the town. It's not coming from the aid. Now, and if you're a town or a city that's getting cut in state aid, it's even harder. If you're a Middletown or a Portsmouth, it's even harder. We're fortunate because we're going to get an extra $7,000, which we're grateful for. But if you could keep what Sally said, but also from a practical standpoint, it's costing money. When they say, districts just have to align curriculum and change teaching standards. It's like you're saying, taking a left turn, going down the road. Well, just take a left here. It's not that simple, and there's costs associated with it that are never addressed. So for whatever it's worth, when you folks take that
And
up.
I think we have very supportive taxpayers, even though we pay 90% of our budget. If we would have if we're more involved in the process, if we're, as Jerry said, there's no conversation at this level. And I think if you are involved in the process, then you're happy to pay for something that you think is going to benefit your children, but that's not happening in the state right now. We're not having that conversation at these levels. So that's sort of, the frustration. Carol, didn't you have something to cost, well, you had brought it up at one of the meetings, the outside
The
services,
special ed, remember? Mr. Canary is
setting a limit.
And that came up also with the Met
The Met.
School, that when our students are sent to other
Control.
schools,
Placements.
facilities,
Outside district
placements,
placements.
whether it's the Met School or
Bradley.
other school settings, there appears to be no limit on the increases in their tuition bills to us.
Well,
So,
under the Met School, they use our per pupil prorated. Next year will be, what, 3/4 of our per pupil for the Met School?
80% was going up.
Well, they changed the formula so that essentially over the years, correct, Doug, that
Yes, it gradually goes to your complete per pupil
We
for
have
the Met School.
legislation.
We're
for
actually
it, right?
getting about 60,000 in additional state aid, but we're being charged about 70,000 in additional net tuition, so we actually are falling behind.
so whatever your per pupil cost is, and that's what they get.
That's what
Yes,
they'll be charged.
eventually they'll get
When-
that. That's their
It's
tuition.
going 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, and I
right,
think we're at the
and
80%.
their tuition can increase whatever they decide a year, 5%, 10%?
Because it's our cost, but for sped out-of-district placements, you're kind of at the mercy of the market.
So the Met is
Now, the Met
is
School
controlled?
originally in
No.
Newport was supposed to be for free.
None that
It
are
was supposed to be
like
for
Portsmouth.
free tuition, it was
I
going to
know.
be paid for by the state.
We have group
When they
homes, but they
revised
don't
the
really
state funding
tell us in the
formula,
application.
they
They're mostly
that got
adult.
put into
Right.
the funding formula.
So the Met is
Right.
controlled in that
Because
it's
it's
whatever our
state
per
school.
pupil
It's a
cost.
state.
Whatever sending
yeah.
districts per
But not
pupil
It's like
cost
Davies.
is.
That's
Most
what we
likely.
So
pay.
every
All right.
community pays a different.
Where Rogers to the
I
Voc
see.
Centers, there's a set formula, there's a
Right.
different formula.
Right.
For the Met School, it's your per pupil cost.
What is
send
it
to
for
that. What's that?
What is it for Rogers, the VOTEC?
Rogers is, they do it by periods. You get a full-time rate and then.
But again, they
period rates.
they determine
Point
what
I'm
that
trying
is.
to make, because we are holding these guys here, because otherwise we can write some executive summary
The
here.
point-
you know,
No, Jan, it's extremely important. We get charged
I understand.
by outside, this is the point we're trying to make, is that we get charged by outside districts, and there's no, outside suppliers, it's vendors,
Right.
and there's no limit. They
It's
can increase
arbitrary
it by
to the
10%.
Voc Center and it's
arbitrary.
arbitrary to the.
Massachusetts,
They have to get their increases approved at the state level. So an outside placement can't just decide from one year to the next that they're going to increase it by 10%. They have to go and get it approved at the state level and justify it, and perhaps it won't be approved.
And I think Representative Canario put that.
Yeah, Representative Canary and I put that in last year. We're gonna recall that bill,
Yeah.
and we're gonna send a
that
companion
bill
over so
was
that,
not very well written, as I
Right.
recall. Easy for me to say, because I didn't, but it was
It
very
could use-
confusing to me, and I.
Good
when I-
thing I
And it was not based on,
They'll help you out.
it was not based on the Massachusetts model.
I didn't even hear the backup alarm.
CJ, you're taking credit for something you're getting beat up on.
Wow.
Watch it.
Politics, you
Wow.
can't win, man. You can't win.
We're just trying to be honest. It just, we read it, and it was confusing to us. It definitely was not based on
We're
this.
trying to institute a cap that maybe is an alternative to that. That could be
Right,
state
that's
could
right. It was a
negotiate
cap.
Directly with these service providers and set a rate statewide and have some. degree
Yes,
of-
that's
Well,
exactly.
Why don't you look at what we submitted last year, mark it up,
Okay.
and send it to us, and we'll put that in for you.
Good.
We're gonna put it in by
Now,
request.
the last thing I have is the volunteer policy. Remember, and we made one, last us two, and they did such a good job, but we weren't sure if it was local or if it was the national check, because the local
State
check's
check.
$5, the state, and when the other one was $15.
No, the state, the
It's definitely
policy is clear. The policy is
State.
state. Our question
Our
was,
question
should it
was,
be,
though, should it be-
our question is, should it be considered to be a national check?
I do this in Massachusetts all the time, because I work up in their school systems. We get, whatever state you're from, you have to get a BCI, or whatever form they have, from that state directly, and then Massachusetts runs one on you for any activity you might have had within the state. So if you have out-of-state contractors coming in, you might want to insist that they come in with their out-of-state background check already, and then have the Rhode Island background check done.
But we're saying.
Like parents.
We're talking a
Volunteers.
national. So in other words, if you, for a volunteer, someone, somebody moves around California, Texas,
Right.
Arizona, you'll never see that. You'll only see where their most recent place was. You do a national, for example, to be a teacher or a teacher's aide, you have to do a fingerprint national BCI check. In Rhode Island, right now, the way the policy or the law was written was state only. So when we sent them out, all we get back is, someone drunk driving 20 years ago or whatever, misdemeanors or whatever show up. It's just for Rhode Island. We don't know. We require folks that live in Mass, who may be grandparents that come to volunteer, to do a Mass background check. But again, it's only good if they do if someone did something wrong in Massachusetts. So our question was, would that be something the General Assembly would consider to maybe expand the background check to the national level?
Just a heads up, this is an election year. You definitely want to get your stuff in early.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
And-
how, if we have resolves, is that how you would like to?
If you resolves, or if you have draft legislation.
Okay.
You just send it up to us and we'll, if you send it to the senators, they'll pass it across. If you send it to the House, we'll send it over to
Should
them.
we send it to you, Jay, or to Wally, or?
Either one of us, or both, and we'll just get
And
them.
you'll kind of have your lawyers, or your
Yes,
they
your people
draft
that
them up.
write on.
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't have to send the real language, it can be, these are our thoughts.
Yeah.
If
Okay.
people-
We can get it
real
drafted
people
and send it back.
language,
Oh,
then
good,
you guys
okay.
can turn it into the match.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll try. I mean, I'm sure
I mean, the important
Mrs. Polish will
aspect,
take a really good look at it.
Oh, Mrs. Herman will too.
Yes.
She's our
Very good at it.
editor-in-chief.
I
So
mean,
I
the
ha-
important aspect in terms of any legislation, usually the process is that to have it submitted on the Senate side and the House side,
Jointly.
because of the fact that that way it already gets transferred to, if it's education or finance, to those separate committees that start that process. Because, as I mentioned before, usually what happens is that the bills are tried to be, majority of the bills are submitted before the end of February. The chairpersons get together. For instance, I'm the chair of the Special Legislation and Veterans Affairs Committee. And what I would do is to get all those bills at the end of February and put them in like fashion. In other words, all the special plate bills would go into one bucket, all the veteran bills would go into one bucket, all the gambling type bills, all the liquor type bills, and so on. And then have individual hearings 1 week after another on each of those buckets of bills. And so that's your first note that I should be paying attention towards the Senate and the House to see what kind of bills they're hearing. And then if they pass those by the end of March, early April, then it gets brought over to the other side for those types of hearings.
So I think we have 5 we need to work on. Housing aid's already written, but housing aid, kneecap park, outside vendor costs, and the BCI.
Do you have anything, Mr. Fundy?
So there'll be the difference between the resolutions you might pass on bills already written, and for bills that you want, we'll want whatever draft language you might want to put forth, and we can have the lawyers do their magic and write it so that
Or I guess a
we can understand
resolution, a
it.
resolution kind of tells you what we want.
Sure,
too, if
you could do that as well, yes.
You can.
But
You
if the
could
bill
just-
already exists, you can just pass a resolution
okay,
in
all
support
right.
of that particular bill number.
Yeah.
Anybody else have?
And again, from the financial perspective, a lot of you people are veterans in terms of putting the budget together. It's one of those perpetual problems that exist in terms of the governor's going to be coming out with a tentative state aid formula, as you alluded to, and the legislature will be working on those particular numbers, but we can't finalize those numbers until we have the May Revenue Estimating Conference, which is almost around the time that you're having your financial town meeting.
Yes.
So, the only type of advice we'd like to give, but no one seems to pick up on it, would be if you could ever propose a budget over a 14-month period. That way your budgets would start, say, in August or September, and then you'd really know what that figure would be. Because we both start on July 1st type of fiscal year process.
He had a councilman, Hannibal Costa, who put that in every year. No one liked it.
I mean, East Providence is probably the only school system
Yes,
that
that does
starts
it.
on that time, and so they actually know for sure what the state aid formula is going to be.
Anybody else have anything? No? Mr. Barrett?
No, I'm all set, thank you.
Everybody? Thank you so much.
Good luck, and if you
you.
want us to come back halfway through the session, we will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't
Have
tell
a good night.
Dennis we didn't like his bill.
Oh, you got one of you? Your selfie? Show me.
Okay. The budget, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, depends how the committee would like to handle things. The slides, pretty much, I updated this one to reflect the number. I incorrectly put a little more money in the last time that the town, that we could spend to, which we're not going to. But it's really just for folks' informational purposes.
Did you include those three numbers you emailed
No.
us? Those aren't in
They're
there?
not
Okay.
included. The teacher and those other items are not, because like I
Okay.
said in the email, I didn't want to get into the paper
Confuse it. Okay.
confusion.
Yep.
And again, the increase in our state aid is calculated on your free and reduced number.
Yep.
And the key items. The budget schedule we talked about, which tomorrow, Doug and I have to hustle to get out the preliminary numbers that we agree on tonight, and get it to the town hall. And again, the schedule hasn't changed since our last meeting, nor will it. Our first issue that we had some questions about was staffing. And the question came up, and Mr. Soers is here. I met with Dennis, Lori, and Steve this past Friday, or Thursday, I believe, to review the questions that came up at our meeting, at our last meeting. And as you can see, and I believe we provided it to you, a tentative breakdown to bring Portuguese up to, and I don't have it on the screen, it's in your
Yeah,
packet,
right,
I'm
right.
looking at
up
it.
to the same level as Spanish. In other
Right.
words, within 3 or 4 years, we would have to add an AP Portuguese,
Hopefully.
hopefully.
There will be the demand
Yeah, if
for
we
it.
can
Yeah.
fund it, obviously, as you can see, it's
And
gonna...
there's the demand, I hope there's the...
Right, and there's demand, but the whole idea was to try to mirror what we had at the middle school. And, we talked again about what's the best way to do it. And Dennis, can you just, and probably best to hear it from our world language expert, as to why he would like to, why we recommended the academic Portuguese and exploratory for year one.
Okay, so I believe everybody has a copy of the,
Yes.
Yep.
okay.
Yes.
So this was a gradual implementation of the portions of the middle school. To mirror it with Spanish, I just wanted to make this an opportunity to bring Spanish to what it was. When Ed Silver was here, he originally
Right.
designed the program.
Right.
When he was here, academic Spanish was 7th grade and it was 8th grade. And that better prepared the students when they came to the high school.
Is it sort of
Yes.
slower when you do the A
Slower.
and B?
It's not as intensive.
Okay.
It's not as intense. It gives the students more time to develop it because honestly, right now we're asking our 8th grade students to do the same thing as 9th grade students.
Okay.
And for best practices, it's very difficult for the 8th grade student. It really is. And we've seen at the up at the high school, since the program has changed from a 7th grade to an 8th grade only program, I hate to say the students aren't as prepared as they were before.
Right.
It has nothing to do with the 8th grade curriculum or anything. It's just the reality. We're asking 8th graders to do the same thing as a high school freshman.
And in terms of foreign language learning, the truth is that in order for things like irregular verb forms to go into their long-term memories, the more they practice it over time, over the 2 years, then it's in their long-term memory in a way that it isn't if you do it 1 year. You cram for a test, you write down that verb form, but it takes daily practice and over months and years for that recall to become automatic. And anybody who's taught a foreign language knows that. And it's so important that they get those 10 most common irregular verb forms in the present tense down into their long-term memory before you put them into past subjunctive. And I think that's probably the difference you saw with them coming up, that it wasn't automatic, that it, those kind of basic noun genders, verb tenses, that you like to see before you move them up into the more difficult grammar.
Yeah, no question
So,
about
Sir,
it.
I just have a question. Does this apply to history, mathematics, English, what you were saying about short-term and long-term memory? I think, this is basically, it applies to anything we study, because we could say, well, can someone benefit from studying math for 10 years instead of for 6 years? Absolutely. I think the argument is obviously valid. The longer, the better. I'm not buying too much in terms of, well, let's just take it slower. I believe that if kids are challenged, they will meet this challenge, as opposed to you talking about, well, maybe it's too much for them, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know, unless you have specific data which backs it up, then
Well,
obviously it's a financial decision. Are we going to add one more year of academic language? And then the question is, what about some other subjects?
Well, it's really, we
What about
have
computers?
2/5 now, and we want to go up to 5/5, so it's a 3/5 position, correct?
It's a 2/5
This year.
for this year, for next year.
Right, so ultimately, we're
2/5.
talking about going up to, so we're
Yes,
talking about
eventually.
adding,
Yes, eventually, if you want,
Okay.
if we can financially, if it's something the committee wants to do. If you want to commit to, making it mirror the Spanish program, that's what you have in front of you.
I could see, though, Jan, the progression, though, because you're going to remember, math, we're teaching math from kindergarten on. So we are having that repetition and that eventual build-up, where seventh grade is the first time we're really introducing, or sixth, do we still do sixth, world language. So they don't have that, that progression that we have every year in math and in English and history. And, it's kind of the first time they're seeing it. So I could see how, at least initially, for a seventh and eighth grader, you might want to have a slower progression, because they are sort of seeing it for the first time, versus us teaching Spanish from kindergarten or even from fourth grade, which a lot of districts do.
We used to.
Yeah.
I'm not arguing with the premise that it's better. I'm only simply saying that the argument we are making applies to any subject. And so this is a financial decision if we are going to finance this venture or some other venture, because, for example, in my case, I feel I have nothing against foreign languages. I think this is a subject which is actually underemphasized. For example, colleges, for many majors, you are not required to. You can graduate from college and never learn a foreign language. But what about computer skills, being able to use technology in your jobs, et cetera, et cetera? Well, that's another alternative how you can spend your money.
True. So were you all set? Were you?
I'm not sure if you have any-
Dennis is just here if you have any questions.
So that explained
That explains
why it's
it was-
academic in seventh grade, because our assumption was that we were sticking with the model that we used just the last few years, where the academic
is
was only in the
right.
eighth grade.
No.
I'm glad to hear we're going back to the model that, as you said, did work better. We've used both now. It's clear that it was better in the long run
And I
to
wasn't
have the
clear
seventh
enough
and
on that
eighth.
at our last
So to
meeting,
move both the Portuguese and Spanish programs at the middle school back to this 2-year model, which, by the way, is common in middle schools when they offer an academic language, that they do it over 1.5 or 2 years, and then you enter high school with the second year.
So it is
that-
certainly best practice.
Yes, it is. So I'm glad to see that we're taking the opportunity to adjust the Spanish program too at the middle school. Thank you for that.
I want to thank you too, because we're all very pleased with that as well.
Yeah.
So
I-
We're going to take full advantage of it with the students, and
Yeah.
hopefully they'll get the best out of it.
Right. And as Mrs. Polish pointed out recently, it benefits so many students, because even for those who don't go on to AP, they want 3 years of a foreign language before they graduate from high school. It gives them much more flexibility in their high school scheduling in terms of classes, to complete the 3 years before graduation.
And then take something else.
Right.
If they want to.
I do have some questions about the specifics, I don't know if anyone else does. I'm looking at this sheet, and I do want to thank yourself and Lori and Steve for meeting, because it is so important, no matter what we're doing, especially in 7th and 8th, though, this bridged to the
That it
programs,
transitions well.
whatever that program is at the middle school. So I thank you all for meeting. Mrs. Howland, it says she's going to be teaching 5 sections?
No, one is Mrs. Bullier, who currently teaches it.
Oh, so the one is a 1/5?
Yes, what she is in the budget.
Okay, so by the second year, we will have dropped that 1/5.
It will be absorbed,
Oh, it'll be absorbed by the other teacher?
yes.
Okay.
And then the
Gotcha.
additional, because the idea is to, again, expand Portuguese to 3/5, so
Gotcha.
that need for the Spanish wouldn't be there.
All
We'd
right.
shift it. Basically, you're shifting your position from there to.
Yeah, you're
Right,
absorbing it
which
into
we
the other.
discussed.
Okay.
Right, so
I
it's
just
really
wanted
a
to make sure.
switch, as a, cost-wise, in that second year, of our first year, excuse
And then
me.
someone asked me, it's just, why do we say 2/5, 3/5, and then full-time? Because they're really not fifths anymore. And it's really 4/5 plus
Yeah, it's
planning
just-
time is 5/5.
Yeah, it's just old nomenclature that
Exactly.
the old
That
dinosaur
is
can't get
right.
out of us.
Because they only teach, right, correct, four
At the
four
middle
periods,
school,
and then
that's
they have a
correct.
planning period, so.
And
And
so-
and then they have a common.
A
plan.
comment, right, so I just, people, and the bottom here is
Yeah.
cut off, right? Was
Right.
anybody else's cut off?
Yes.
So it's basically whatever I see from above is just below?
Yes,
One-
because that we're probably missing one for Holland.
So
Okay.
in
Got it.
2016, 2017, the Portuguese teacher, for example, would teach one section of 7th grade academic, one section of 8th grade academic, and 2 sections of exploratory? Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
it
okay,
got cut
so
off.
that's what I
And
missed.
there'd be
Right.
one.
Okay.
one
And it would be similar
explore-
with Spanish?
Yes.
Yes.
It just got
Thank
cut off when the copy was made, down here on the bottom.
So the total additional cost per year from now on is
For the-
15,000.
For next year, it's 15,000
For,
in the
05.
budget. And then next year, the following year, it's the same.
yeah,
It's
because
flat.
We're
it's
not
another,
moving.
Right.
Well, I understand.
So the third
If we
year,
add 50, we are paying extra
then in the third,
$15,000
for the next 2
from now
years.
on.
No, for the next 2 years. Because you're paying for the next year and the year after, and then you're expanding that person to full-time in the third year.
Assuming the program. takes
Assuming
off.
we have the money
Right.
and everything else, you would
Can't
be,
talk about what's going to happen in 2
you're
years.
projecting
Well,
that it would be
I understand.
full-time.
but If we are buying a wheel, we know that we have to buy a car. So what is the projected
this person-
cost from now on?
You got your steps.
so
I
15,000?
can give you a rough
Yeah,
number.
just rough.
All right, if you just, Doug will call it up.
So
31.
15,000 next year, then we're
31.
getting rid of a fifth, but we're adding,
We're adding, we're taking that person's dollars.
so it's a wash. in
Right,
a-
yeah, that's what I
Yes.
mean. So in the second year.
It's nothing.
It doesn't, there's no additional cost.
And then in the third year, we're adding essentially another 15 plus benefits, because we're making them full-time, so,
31.
Say step 3 of
right.
a healthcare.
Thank you,
plan.
Jared. Hey, you're quicker than me.
31, yeah.
And then benefits.
Yeah, that's what Doug's,
better.
just to answer Jan's question.
That's big.
50%.
And that's also assuming that we can find somebody interested
Yes.
Right.
and qualified.
Yeah, this is the
Do you-
premise of finding a
And I think
certified
it's-
teacher.
Yeah.
It's assuming that students want to do it, that it's.
Right.
the program
Right.
takes off.
But it's
we're
good
gonna
to
try
know.
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
good to know the
yeah.
full cost. I mean, it's,
My sense is with the plan in place, that should the student interest be there, that we would increase the position. Hopefully that will help us to attract qualified
I
candidates.
mean, what are benefits roughly for a full-time person? I mean, that's all
That's-
it is.
50%.
Health plan's
A
18,000.
little less than that. By the time this would become full-time, it would be about 65,000.
With benefits.
But we already pay for 2/5 of it,
Right,
so
right.
it's
Just
the
be-
Yeah,
excess.
so, yep.
It'd be less than that because you already got the other fifth.
That's what I mean.
So you're talking healthcare plus 2/5,
40-something?
probably,
Okay.
if everything stays.
41, 42?
Yeah, within that range if everything remains relatively constant with our pay scale, which I would assume it would. And our healthcare.
And it's nice that we
Over a
have the,
3-year period, so, okay.
the club at the middle school this year. Hopefully that will help
Yeah.
generate the interest for signing up next year.
I think we'll find out the interest, because I mean, ideally, the students who take the 7th grade portions are going to go into the 8th grade.
Right.
So I think we'll find out next year. I mean, if you only have 5 students that sign up, obviously we know. But if we have 20 students, then we're going to assume
We'll
that
know
those
when
20
we start
students
the
are going to
schedule.
continue.
Right.
We'll know about our interest will be.
Although you probably need to give it, I would think, at least 2 years, because this year,
Sure.
kids may
No,
not know.
but the initial, right, the initial push,
Right.
you'll see if you have some interest.
But,
But like anything else.
you're right, we'll see.
So is
So,
that-
so we should sort of, I think, take a consensus whether we do or don't want to go in this direction, so that we know.
Well, I need to know, do you want this in the budget or you don't? Because we gotta adjust it so it can get to the budget.
And we just don't, I mean, this is so quick, we really have to.
You can
make
always
these-
come back to something. if
Yeah,
you-
we
if
can come back and cut
if-
it,
If
but-
you agree to cut something and later on say, well, we want that back, I mean, we still have until March 8th.
I'm going to make a motion that we support this.
I second it. Any questions? For anyone? No? Mr. Rarity, anything?
No, and again, staffing is, it's predicated that our numbers stay relatively stable for our other positions. And again, we had that spike this year in first grade. We had to open the section. We'll, again, because enrollments happen over the summer, that's just something that we'll have to adjust to. But our enrollment numbers have been pretty consistent the last 5 years, so
Well, just-
everything goes right. This should be the only
So
increase.
at this point, it would be to give initial support for it.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
And again, here's our enrollment. And again, we talked about that. The
Can I
next.
just say one
Sure.
thing before we leave the Portuguese
Yes.
issue? Jan did bring up a valid point, which is there's probably other areas of program that we're restoring a program that I guess existed a few years ago. It'd be nice, we'd be certainly willing to hear from the principals if there's other academic programs that they think we could add that, obviously,
Can we hear from us, too?
and from us or from parents and students, that's the kind of way we're gonna, sort of continue to grow, and certainly not everything is doable, but it'd be always nice to know what it is that is on your guys'
People's
wish list
minds.
or people's minds to see where we could, maybe we can find money sometimes.
I try, and if it's critical, we do talk about these things internally. I will bring them to your, I mean. if
Yeah.
it-
No, I expect
Yeah,
that.
you do.
But for right now, for example, at Fort Barton, their numbers are a little higher because they had that extra period. Are we going to need maybe more supplies? I mean, we have to see if those numbers
Right.
hold and things like that. So, I mean, if there's something later on that we need, we bring it to the committee, so.
Well, and I think your principal, I mean, things come from the teachers to the
Right.
principals
Let's
to
push
you, and
this
you
up
sort of
to-
vet these already,
Yeah.
but certainly parents probably are
Yeah.
involved
Yeah.
in that process, and they may have thoughts about it.
But keep in mind, this is an exceptionally favorable year for us.
Yep.
So that we can look at something, it's not that big, and Jan made it a good point. What's the cost would be if we could,
Yeah, it is.
move it forward? Hopefully, I wish we had favorable years like this every year. We had the trust, windfall. So we just have to keep that in mind, that it's not always as rosy, let's say, as it is so far.
If there's so much money, we should buy it.
Maybe it's not a-
Remember 2014, 15, am I
I
right?
already have remembered 2009.
I have that.
Okay, so what do we have next?
The next item that we talked about, it's the only extracurricular staffing request, comes from Steve and Bob for cross-country. Conversation came up, I believe Jerry asked for it, we provided it to you. A list of positions that we pay for in the district and that we don't pay for.
So on the
So-
left,
yeah,
or what
On the
we pay for?
left, just so you understand, on the left, we pay for, and cheerleading should be stipend only, but that was left out.
That's what I wondered.
But On the second page, those are all stipend, most of these are just stipends, for example, class advisor.
So everything on the second
Left.
page on the left is also stipend?
Yes, just stipend.
Okay.
Is the assistant coach, what, is that cheerleading?
Yep.
Yes,
And do we pay them stipend as well?
yes.
These pages. So all
Very
the,
first page.
so Unified Basketball, Future Business of Leaders America, Gay
Gay
Straight
Straight
Alliance, Hiking Club, those are all volunteer
Everything on your right's volunteer.
Okay.
And I'd like
things.
to thank everyone for all those volunteers. It's
Yeah,
wonderful
there's a
to
lot of
read this and
volunteers.
see all the great things we're doing in the schools. It's amazing.
So explain to me the difference
get it.
between a baseball coach and a stipend only. Is it that we pay for the
We pay for
total?
the we pay for everything.
For every transportation,
Equipment,
Officials.
transportation,
equipment,
referees,
reps.
umpires.
Okay.
Yes.
So when there's a stipend, we're only paying a small piece of it?
Gloria Christ,
Okay.
Gloria, stipend.
We don't pay any of her costs? We
Our
don't pay any
mock
of that?
trial advisors, stipend.
Okay. Lacrosse, we don't pay, busing, we don't pay any of that, we just pay a
We pay
stipend?
the stipend for the
That's it.
position.
So
Right.
it's like 2,000, whatever it is.
Whatever it is, it's a set,
Okay, thank you.
But there are other expenses involved.
Yeah, the things that say stipend only, that's it, that's all. For example, there are other expenses associated, obviously, with lacrosse, the basketball
Right,
program,
right.
and cross-country.
Right.
We only pay the stipend.
Yes.
On the right-hand side, it's obviously volunteer, and the
Right.
kids stay here for the most part. But on the back side, it's all, there's no travel, with honor society or anything like that. It's a stipend position.
Right. Although some of them, as you pointed out, with drama, there are expenses.
Yes.
Right.
They're
And
basically self-sufficient. or
And Gloria uses the receipts from the performances to
offset
pay
the
her,
expenses.
she gets donations and things of that sort.
All these things on the left on the second page, those aren't stipends only, those are also,
No,
the
those
ones on
are
the
pretty
second
much
page are
stipends.
stipends.
are all, so everything's stipend. Okay.
On the
left
second
side.
page,
On the second
everything is
page.
stipend, right?
Got it.
Yes,
Okay.
and it was, so.
And so this is a position that is stipend only as well?
No, this would be, it's presented as everything.
It's everything.
And-
Or a
and
new
that-
sport.
And that was my argument, is where we've got so many organizations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just on the front and all the back, where, especially sports, where we're only stipends, and we're not fully supporting what we already have. And we have many volunteer organizations that, I know the intramurals at the high school are at the middle school are very popular, and they're all volunteered.
So
That
that
I
should be-
don't feel we can add another fully supported sport when we have all of these other things that are stipend only. Just the pure, and I understand that they want, you have a big program at the middle school and you want to have someplace to feed it, but again, when we had this discussion with them, when they brought this forward, and remember, it was just volunteer at the point, we weren't even giving them a stipend. The discussion was, we didn't have a high school program, but the conversation was, well, but running is good, sort of,
everything else. It is.
for
Exercise.
any sport.
Yes.
Yeah.
So regardless of whether they go into soccer, football, it's
Lacrosse, right.
it's a terrific sport, just mind and body. So that was sort of the conversation. So, that's sort of my issue with it, just from a pure fairness perspective and a perspective of, we're pretty aware at the time that there was no feeder program. If the feeder program is the priority, then maybe you want to switch the stipend to field hockey or soccer and start that kind of program and go away from, cross-country and spend your money on something that already has a feeder program at the high school.
Feeder program.
Feeder program being that
It goes into a
it
program
goes
that
into a
already
program
exists
in the
at
high school
That already exists.
that already
That
exists.
already is
Yes.
there. This is kind of the reverse.
Right, they
Middle
started
school
it at the
and
middle
then
school
to the
and
high school.
now want it at the high
Want
school.
to establish it in the high school too. I get it.
And that was part of the discussion when this was added, is that there was nothing. But like I said to Bill last week, I do applaud us, if we're gonna have something, getting away from saying, well, you can have it, but you're gonna have to pay for it all yourself, because I think that's such a burden on our parents and our community to have these organizations where they're 100% volunteer funded.
And just for, for maybe Jerry, for some more background, for those programs that we started at the middle school, there were a core group of parents that were behind it and agreed to fundraise. There may be parents out there that would be willing to fundraise for this at the high school, but it has not, it hasn't come to us. So that's another reason why, I was unsure, is there a group out there that would be willing to pick up the transportation, the uniforms, all those other items outside of the salary? So I put it all together.
But like I said, even if there
No, I
is,
understand.
I really would like to get away from that. We either commit to it as a district and we pay for it, or we don't.
No, I
Because
understand. I'm just
our
saying that's-
volunteers
That's why I just didn't do stipend.
are so thin. I mean, they work all the time to work, and if the district is going to embrace it, I would like to see us embrace it and pay for it.
Mrs. Mitchell, could you tell us a little bit about the middle school program?
It is very popular and has been for the past 3 or 4 years that it has been consistent. And we had 19 students going to a meeting of cross-country meets, for day. They all participate, they all run their hearts out. We have kids from our Bradley program in it. Very popular. I also hear what Mrs. Polish is saying, your COA does have soccer, and the kids do express an interest in soccer. It is something that would feed the high school. It is incredibly popular. Are we blazing any trails in terms of times and championships? No. But it really does build community. Parents, I think we have the most amount of parents at every meet, without a doubt in my mind. Our parents also run the meets. They all volunteer, Mrs. Phillips, and there's just so many of them. 2 bus loads. I think we're the only school with 2 buses of athletes. But it is, I'm thinking critically about it at this point in terms of, where do we go with it? There's no program at the high school. If there isn't going to be one that's developing here, then maybe we should look at our schools.
But it certainly is, just from a physical education standpoint, it's still very useful, very valid. I mean, I think part of the reasons it was so popular is it was the only game in town for years. Up here, you have how many?
Right, but I think it also, kids can compete at all different skill levels, and you don't need any equipment.
I think I'd hate to see you get rid of it, even if there's not a feeder program. I think it's a...
Right. And so that they can be with a group of their friends after school, doing some sort of physical activity, and you don't need to be, have any special skills, really.
Exactly.
Well, we're paying, or we're spending taxpayers' money. These parents are the taxpayers, or they're a subset of the taxpayers. I mean, I guess if I was going to approve it, I would like to sort of hear that there is interest from the students and the parents, that this is what they want us to do with the money.
But even if there is, Jerry, I can
I
get a
know.
group of parents in to support
Right.
lots of things. I mean,
Right.
that's where we have to make the tough decisions.
Well,
I mean, are we going to just
usually
support
they
anything that
tell
we
us.
get asked for?
No.
Well,
But,
right. And especially when you've got parents who came and asked for lacrosse and came and asked for, cheerleading and asked for these, and we don't support those. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, that parents support it, but I think our parents support a lot of things, and they're great, but everybody can't have everything, and you kind of have to say, well, until a point where we're supporting some of these other things in the budget, if we were supporting all of these things and this was just addition, I would say absolutely, it's $8,000, but we're not.
I mean, I feel if we're going to make a decision to invest more in our sports programs, that we should start by funding more of these partially funded sports.
And when's the last time we've increased Bob's supply budget?
I think this year,
It was the first year in
a long time.
a long
He
time.
never gets.
Yeah, our athletic budget has been flat for a decade.
Long time.
Now, Mr. Rivers, you said this request came from Mr. Murray and Mr. Fazette?
Yeah.
Mr. Fazette, did you want to say anything?
I think this is probably something that Bob and I have been, it's been on the stove, so to speak, for a number of years because we have such a nice facility. And having a cross-country program would be really just probably your introductory step to looking towards the future of even maybe going into much more fuller track program. So when I discussed it with Bob, this is really just the beginning step of a full-blown track program at a high school. So I think it's something that we had to discuss, we had to bring up, and based on interest and whether it's money put into the budget or not. We should at least know that there's an interest, and it's not just a forgotten son or daughter, that we have that nice facility up there that it's been paid for, or is being paid for.
And I do think that it's been an impediment to the middle school program, the fact that there is no feeder, that the kids, the program can't really develop if there's nowhere for the kids to go after.
But you have 93 kids.
Yeah, and I would say about 30% of them really could excel in high school. I'm a runner myself. I run with them, we run around the track up here, it's beautiful.
Is there another sport that you could see eliminating to add this?
Haven't had that discussion.
Okay.
That's a possibility.
If this is so popular and there's such a need, I'm curious to know if there's another sport that you would consider eliminating to add it. To go in a direction where we would be utilizing our track, because certainly lacrosse uses that track.
Or they use the
Football,
field.
Yeah, they use the field, right. But it's a beautiful field.
So's the track.
Yeah.
We can fund the coach, and that's it.
That's certainly a compromise, yeah.
What I'm thinking is, the others we do get to give the stipend to.
Yeah.
So if we gave the stipend to
That's
this
a
one.
compromise.
I'm sorry, I'd just say make it contingent on
Well, of course.
that we have parents that will
If they don't come,
fundraise.
then they don't come, but,
But there is other piece available.
Yeah, just,
Right.
I'd want that in the vote.
right.
So, well, I would like to have one or more parents come
Yeah.
before us, as they did for lacrosse, to say, there is a group of us, we are
will
committed
fundraise for
to
it.
fundraise for
Well, and
it.
they did for the middle school, too.
So
I would want to wait
That's
to
a good
take our
compromise.
vote
I thought that.
But
to,
they have to submit the budget tomorrow, so I think we could say,
It's a preliminary, we can,
Yeah.
we'll put it in the preliminary
Contingent on
budget.
if nobody
And I
comes.
think it-
Afforded.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good
Yeah, I think it
compromise,
is,
Jan, that in
yeah.
fairness, we'll do a
place
stipend,
the
but not
coach
the
and
whole.
salary.
Well, the
Stipend.
stipend,
Well,
not the
that's-
salary, a
yeah,
stipend,
that's-
whatever the
well,
stipend
that's-
was for.
That, it would be the salary.
But we do that for the others.
Yep.
Be- that
So
would be
that
the
was
salary.
I think
fair.
that's a fair compromise.
And from the health and wellness aspect, which we always do, it's so good for the kids, and like we said, so many kids do it that wouldn't do something else. And the other thing is keeping the kids safe and secure after school.
Well,
We
they
know
all
this-
do that, Sally.
I know, but I'm just saying.
All these programs do that.
So that's another program that would do it for more kids, that's all I'm saying.
Right, but,
You know.
again,
That's
Well,
fair
and
enough.
again, it'd be good to hear,
Choices.
are there other sports or activities that
right.
there's a groundswell of demand for?
Right, exactly.
It'd be good to hear about those, because then we could know.
Outside of
okay,
sports, like the
There's a-
science club.
There's other things,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's, I mean, we now have a third-party arts group that does arts, we don't pay for it.
Right,
So,
absolutely.
True. You've gotta look at
can't have everything,
You've
guys. I
gotta
mean,
look
we
at
really,
everything.
you got to think about it. But I think that's a fair
It's a good
compromise that Mr.
compromise.
Burgundy has proposed.
Okay, so do we have a motion for that?
Bridge builder.
So moved.
Henry Kissinger's here.
Time over.
Henry Kissinger's amongst us, and we didn't even know it.
He is.
With those stipulations that you wanted on there, Mr. Mayor?
Well, it's.
Well, it's contingent upon the rest of it being
it's contingent.
fundraised.
We, in turn, Steve will speak with Bob and
Okay.
try to get some
And as
parents.
Carol said before, we give final approval, we would like to see
Right.
the parents
That's
here
what I
to
mean,
make
we'll
that
have them
commitment.
come before you.
Okay.
yes.
All right,
And,
well, any-
I mean, because if it's just one parent saying, I'm going to do all the fundraising,
No, I
that's a
understand.
problem.
I understand.
Any other questions from anyone? No? Okay, all those in favor? Okay.
Thank you for that. The next items are capital, I believe. I mean, my recommendation here, and we can take each one if you want, some of these things we've put off.
What
Others,
about the the guidance
I don't have that,
in the middle
it's
of
not
this?
my PowerPoint.
Oh, it was in
That
our
was just-
backup.
Well, that's because you asked for that.
Well,
as-
yeah.
Well, it's
So-
not an addition, that's why we're not going to.
Right, it's not, I didn't put it into here, so.
Oh, okay, so you want to go through that and then
If we
we'll
could
come
do
back
that,
to
and then we'll
that?
come, come back to that. My recommendation to the committee is, we've asked for the new lockers in the boys' locker room, at least 5 years now, 6 years. Always gets cut out. Many of these other items, as you can see on this page,
What about the lockers in the girls' room? When have they been replaced?
the recommendation came, again, I base
Just
it
the
on,
boys?
I didn't get a girls' locker room recommendation, so I'm going with the boys. That's,
Yeah, I'm not sure when the girls were last replaced. We're just going basically on the present condition.
well, they have baskets, they don't have lockers. They don't have
Okay.
lockers per se,
On present condition.
Okay.
and they have changing, like a changing room like you would to go.
So
try
the
out clothes.
condition of those is
I know,
not
'cause
in
I
the
used to
shape that
coach
these
there.
are to warrant the request right now. Yep.
And if we're gonna start
When I
somewhere.
coached,
That's fine.
that's where they
Yep.
put the visiting team, was in the girls' locker room. Sorry, I digress with Mr. Larkin. The first three are health and or all of them are health and safety. At the middle school, again, this is all health and safety. The speakers, I would argue, are also health and safety, so Lori or whoever can communicate both in the cafeteria, when we have, it's not really health and safety inside the cafeteria, but it's hard to hear when there's presentations, when parents come in for performances or whatever, it needs to be improved and replaced. And Pecasset, there was an error. I added an extra zero. I had 5,000. Al was good enough to say, you made a mistake.
Good job,
Well,
Al.
He said, I said, that's good, because it'll make me look like both a dope and a hero, because I put the extra zero in, but now it's only $500.
He's saying that I
Some
went
other
with the
zeros.
Yeah. And then Fort Barton, the air conditioning in the library, and the fence in the rain garden. I think all those items, I'm recommending to the committee that they consider, we just take them out of the budget, but agree to pay for it out of our carry forward.
Or
Because they're one-time only.
or the reimbursement
Yeah.
for now.
Because at one time,
How,
Whatever.
Right now from carryover and
the
what
point
we are
is,
going to get
the
is
point
what
is,
we
it
get.
So
come-
we're going to take them out of the budget
the
for
point
now.
would be to
And
take
pay
them
them
out,
with an alternate means.
right,
and then to explain, whatever we
Okay.
call it,
yeah,
explain to the budget committee when we go before them.
right.
That we're going to try
They're
to find
one-time
a way to
onlys,
form them.
so, if anyone had any questions, for example, we're at 785 with the carry forward right now, minus
Okay.
the healthcare. We'll say, okay, look, we're going to offset that by paying for these
With
things.
those.
And what's the total for this,
The total
that you're
is
going to
in
pull out and?
the backup, let me just go to that form. It's 234, I believe.
239.
239.
That includes the technology piece, though. Did you go through that as well?
No.
Oh,
What happened
all
with
right, so
technology?
we'll wait.
The non-technology is 90,000.
Non-tech.
No, I didn't get to that. This is just capital alone.
Wait a minute.
This is 90,000, right?
So 90K. and-
$90,055.
Okay, so that's our first piece.
90,055 non-technology. Okay,
90,000 with technology, is that what you're
No.
saying?
Non-technology.
No, this is for capital. These are for the
Oh, yeah.
security.
Yep, I got that.
It has nothing to do with the, we
Yeah.
haven't gotten there yet.
But we're going to pull these out of the budget. Okay.
The next item that we talked about was our PD. And, again, I recommend that we obviously fund these requests, but we keep them in the budget. Yeah, we don't take them out. It'd be 27,000.
So we still have the 9,000 and the 9,000?
No, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Talk about wanting to move a meeting, guys.
Well, we do.
I just thought that was part of the 27,
No.
but it's
No,
not.
it's not. No.
No.
No, I'm just, I didn't put it here, but Diane went back, sharpened her pencil.
So
and
what's the breakout here of these
the
27?
books, the workbooks, the 12,050 can go down to 5,600.
This
Wait,
is what makes
which
up
one
this
are we on?
27?
No, let me go back, the 27 separate.
Okay.
Go take them one at a
Yeah,
time.
let's look at this.
27 is separate, that's for instructional planning.
That's
Okay.
substitutes. It's mostly substitutes, right?
Well, it's instruction guides.
Right, what we're looking for is to develop a schedule for collaborative planning time for the elementary teachers to meet for all three schools, teachers from all three schools by grade level 4 times a year. We have made every attempt to do this in the past, and oftentimes we don't have the budget to complete it as fully as we would like. And then also at the middle school and high school, this would provide additional time for departmental planning. It's very difficult with both the middle school and high school to schedule for those teachers to get together on a regular basis to look at your curriculum across the grade levels. So we're looking to have the time for teachers to meet 4 times a year.
So this is
for collaborative
ELA?
planning.
It'll be, we focus on the ELA, yeah.
Do we really need to do PE and health now when we're trying to
Legally, we
do
have
all
to.
of this other stuff?
Legally, we have to have a PE health curriculum.
And we don't?
We do,
We're halfway there.
we're halfway home.
Physical
Oh, is this another ride?
education
Yeah.
is completed.
Unfunded
And when do
mandate.
we need to have it done, according to RIDE?
I'll defer to Diane on that with the date.
Actually, we were delayed in getting it accomplished because of the budget shortfalls the past few years, and we were called on it because it is state law to have it in, so it's not a RIDE initiative, it's a state
State
initiative.
law.
Like,
Okay.
same thing.
That the legislature's going to
And it was long overdue anyway, as with all of our department areas.
with a stipend.
It had been many, many years since the high school, middle school, and elementary teachers had gotten together to review their curriculum and to.
Where did that come from? Because when I looked at it, it seemed awfully prescriptive. We're going to have parachute for 4 classes. We're going to skip for 2 classes. Then we're going to have tag for 3 classes.
That came from
Seems
the
very
teachers
prescriptive.
themselves.
Really?
That's the
They
teachers
wanted it
themselves.
that prescriptive?
They wanted.
Term 1, we're going to do this. Term 2, we're going to do that. Term 3, we're
Yes.
going to do
Well,
this.
this is PA science, PE science.
Whew, okay. It just seemed
I-
so prescriptive.
as an-
I could see
And- but
children
when-
should be able to.
But when you look at the math guide,
Yeah.
it's prescriptive as well.
Well, math,
But it's still, when I was teaching, you used time blocks. And, you'd say, for 2 weeks, I'll spend doing, blah, blah, blah. And if you needed to move things around, you could. Where now, because of the assessments, the teachers are more under the gun to say, I got to get these things done.
I mean, I can see
now,
the
and-
standards that may say, the ability to movement and that kind of stuff, but it just seems so prescriptive.
But
But
that's
if
what-
that's what it
So they
is.
worked from those end-of-year standards that you're talking about, and then they just mapped out their instruction for the year together, and basing it on what they currently do, things that they feel work best for students. And if you'll notice, they do have some alternate units in there so that they can change things a little bit each year and adjust it as they see fit.
So what are we writing if that's all written and done?
So this year, they've developed the curriculum, and then next year it would be follow-up on identifying the appropriate resources for that, and not so much for physical education, but more
More
so
for
as
health.
revisiting how we address substance abuse
Okay.
and other issues like that.
Okay. With this whole new Common Core Park, I'm just asking all kinds of questions
I'm-
about curriculum, so
okay.
it's not going to stop, so I'm just warning you.
It's okay. Is this slide okay to
Yes.
move forward? Okay. Here, I jumped ahead before. The 12,000, if you take the first 2 items, Diane, again, went back, looked at everything, scaled it back. We can get those items for $5,600.
Okay.
Is there still copying?
The top?
We minimized, and the cost of 5,600 is just to reproduce only the essential pieces that teachers would need to have in front of them when standing before a group of students. So there's still a multitude of other resources that would remain online as a resource, or that could be printed out as needed, such as assessments and things like that.
The top
So
3 are down to 5,600?
The top 2.
Oh, the top 2.
The writing program is, we can save $1,303. It will cost $7,000.
1303.
Yeah, so it will cost us, we'll save $1,303. The cost is $7,670.
You're going to send it to a print shop or do it in copy?
We just reduced the number of writing program sets that we would buy, so that some specialists would share with the classroom teacher as opposed to having their own. So that's how we were able to reduce the number.
Which number, the first two or
The first two, the first two,
Actually, we did do that also for the teacher guides. We focused, number one priority, make sure that every classroom teacher had the resources that they needed. Ideally, the specialists in the building and special education teachers would have their own copies, but at this
Yeah.
point, if we
I'm
have
just
to
gonna move them as
prioritize,
K4.
I think that we can get by with that, and I also
This
speak
one's
with some of the specialists.
I know. And
we
that
felt
next
that
one is
was appropriate
76.
that we could do that.
I think Mr. Bergani made a good point at the last
767.
meeting, though. We really do need to push to paperless, and we
Now-
are going to push them
we
to
we
that.
can go to paperless
Mhm.
when we talk about the the
Right.
computers.
And maybe this wouldn't be the year because it's the, but I think that was a really good
It's
point.
about, in a ballpark, I don't go, because I wasn't prepared really to talk about it, but it's, I believe, if I remember my math, if you took these numbers here for the top 2, it would be another $6,000, be about $18,000 total for laptops for the elementary teachers.
Hmm.
And I didn't want to confuse anybody or kind of move our focus.
No, and I mean, it
But-
phases, but you
again,
definitely,
that, in our tech plan, it's year 2 for the elementary teachers to get their computers, so.
So what are the corrected or updated numbers for the
The
3 and 4?
okay, the first 2 items will be, when we do this
Together.
again,
Yeah.
will be K4, $5,600.
Okay.
56 instead of,
instead of the
So
1250.
$12,050.
All right.
The writing program
program is, the new number for that
is
is?
$7,670.
That's the
Okay.
K4 writing,
Right.
7,000, what was it, 7?
7670.
Okay,
Okay,
thank
and
you.
the consultant fee stays at 5,000.
And that's, in case we have to bring people in on those 2 days.
7670 is the key.
Okay, yep, got it.
So,
And the things that we're not buying now are available online. So that if we wanted them, we could go to a computer, if we had a computer.
yes.
Yeah.
The computer, you don't have to pay for it, you can get it.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that hasn't changed. These are the informational texts, these numbers, I haven't touched them, and, I believe Diane sent Carol, I don't know if she sent them to everyone, but
Yeah, we all.
we're
we
in
all
the
got-
process.
So this $20,000 is based on buying all the texts that were listed in the Engage New York Grade 3 ELA curriculum?
What you see here is half of the actual total cost, because we're going to be paying for the other half with our textbook money that we currently have budgeted. So this is new, this would be actual new expenses.
But it's for everything that's listed in the
Right.
Engage New
It would
York.
be $40,000, if we had the backup data, if you approved it, it would be $40,000 for grades 3, 4, and it would be 18.5, I think, or whatever it is, 18,000.
Well, right, we already have
For
it,
K2.
money. This is just extra.
This is additional, so we could have it K4. That's correct.
So we're essentially just adopting Engage New York, it looked like to
Curriculum.
me.
Yeah, only grade 3 is the grade that has selected all of those units. They felt that they matched their instruction, and they felt that it would be a good resource. At the other grade levels, there were many of the Engage units that they did not like, so they did not select. And again, we are only,
So you only sent us grade 3?
I sent you
Yeah.
grade 3 as a
Okay.
sample so that you could see what some of the text.
So the
looked
sample
like.
you sent us happened to be the one where they pick them all, not the
Right.
ones where
And
they
that's why
do it.
they're farther
That's why
along,
I'm
because they just
confused.
said, okay, let's rubber stamp it.
You've got it right there. That's why the other grade levels are not as far along, because they were not happy with some of the engaged units, so they're looking at.
They're creating their own
And
units then.
creating their own, and I was with the high school today, and they're adapting some of the units that they currently have.
Right.
And so we will continue the work for the rest of the year, but at this point, we want to make sure that we have a placeholder in there for resources, so that after teachers have done all of this work and are ready to, begin to shift their instruction, we can provide them with the resources that they need.
And as you said, these will still go through the policy procedure of, the teachers will still have to look at them to get a final
Absolutely.
approval.
Yeah.
And again, because we're working with the teachers and
So
developing
it's kind of a
it,
placeholder for the money, but you're still.
They're looking.
They're still
the
deciding.
teachers will still have to be.
That's
involved.
correct, they're still
Okay.
deciding.
Thank
We
you.
need more input.
And I believe that's the PD portion. A little clip. So is the committee going to accept those proposals with the
Well,
minor
the
changes?
PD
or-
wouldn't be one-time expenses.
Go back.
No, those are considered one time.
Well,
I don't think so. Not with all of them.
well, that's why I'm not saying take it out.
Yeah.
I'm saying for the this piece,
I mean,
it
'cause
stays
we
in
have
operational.
science.
Because you're going to
They're
have,
built into the operating.
but keep in mind, we're talking K-4.
Right.
We then have to work on 512.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't know that I would classify them as one-time
I'm not,
expenses. Okay.
and I'm not saying
Thank you.
that.
I
I'm
was just
saying
clarifying
it should
that.
stay in the budget.
So PD, you want in, the capital you want out, okay?
Yes, to answer your question. So we'll move forward with the PD.
Okay.
Okay. What changes to that? Okay, let me just- Technology. Again, student information system for the entire district, and we talked about that at our last meeting. And at the high school and middle school, it's to replace existing teacher classroom computers with either refurbished, or if Al said at the last meeting, possibly even new, because the prices are going down, as well as our secretaries and clerks. And this comes right out of the technology plan. This is the high school, and the middle school is here.
I think even though the student information system is a big chunk of money, I worry not going forward with it because of the 2-year, we're already 2 years out now. So I think we need to,
I would agree. I think it's time that we
right,
kind of jump the shark on it.
yep. Because when we're already looking 2 years out, even if we buy it next year, that's.
That's a good
Right.
thing.
It's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Well, whatever, we're gonna,
It's the beginning of the end, is jumping.
well,
the
Fonzie
shark.
made it, so it was a good thing.
So would that would replace our
Yes,
iParent? Because
that-
they have a Aspen iParent
Yes.
function. Okay.
You meant
Just so
cost of
people
repair.
know, we would be, right, because I was talking with some parents from Barrington, and they had
You guys are
mentioned that
doctors,
they
and I'm just-
look at Aspen online, so there's a parent component to that as well.
Cranston was a district where I reside, they had the maximum to
Okay.
Aspen.
And Portsmouth, I mean,
It's a very nice system.
it's very
Yeah, just so
easy to
people
operate.
realize there is a parent component
Yes,
to it as well.
absolutely.
It's not
Yeah.
just scheduling.
And, again, much like with the capital, these are all one-times. And
Well, it is a form of capital.
Well,
it's a
Yeah,
form of
except you have to
capital.
replace
yeah, I
your
was going to say
computers
certainly
on
the
a regular
student
basis.
information system is one time, but I don't know about, because the very next year, we're going to have to replace
Elementary.
But we're not,
elementary.
well, I guess my point is, we're not gonna come back next year or the year after and say, we need new computers,
At the high
laptops
school.
for these teachers. That's why I understand what you're saying, but I guess you can classify it either way if you
I
want
think
to.
we should eliminate from the budget and just buy it.
And just
buy the
pay
bulk
for it.
of
Yeah.
Because what will that, if you do that, what does that do to the overall, to our overall total too?
Because,
Save the
because,
taxpayers' money,
well,
because
and
we take
because
a lot.
who knows what they're going to cost, I
The
guess, the next
tax
time we do it.
amount.
So it's kind of hard to put a placeholder in when we don't.
Take out everything
That makes
except
sense.
student
Yeah.
information system.
No, that comes out too. It's the
You're
total.
right, and we don't want to build it in the budget, because we could come back and say, we're not going to do
That's
it,
right.
because we don't have the money, so you hate to build it in
You don't need to.
Right.
the base if you don't need to.
Right, so it's,
Yep.
and
Okay.
again, I believe that, the Budget Committee's been very supportive, and really, strongly recommended that if you use your surplus, you use it for those one times.
Okay.
Capital items, so you don't have to spend the rest.
Now,
Okay, if we remove all of the capital technology that we've discussed, it brings the overall budget request to a 2.1% increase over fiscal year 2014.
now that's technology and the capital.
Right. And the total for the new technology with the student information system, do you have that, Doug?
I'm sorry, I excluded the information. Are we gonna leave that in the request?
No.
No,
No, it
that's,
comes out.
there's all out,
It comes out.
all
That
out.
wouldn't be part of the request?
No.
No, they're all one-time expenses.
So we've excluded that, so there is no increase in capital. It goes down to actually the current year amount of $31,004.
Right.
Right,
So our budget would then, now, if you vote on it, that's 2.1. You then build in, we also have a savings of the teacher. For the bubble teacher at Ranger, who, we don't need that bubble class anymore. That's a $60,000 savings. That will drive us down, what, 0.2? It'll drive us under 2%, or close to 2%.
Nothing wrong with that.
And let's talk about
Yeah, and then there's the
other
other-
position before we move on.
So
to-
the fourth grade bubble teacher, we have the capacity
At the middle school?
At fifth grade to handle those extra students?
Yes.
Just because it's, versus one teacher having them, you can kind of,
Because you're
Spread
spreading
them
those
out about
25 out over,
Yeah. that's-
more
Right,
teachers.
right.
the
Yeah.
two teams.
Yep.
so.
Just so people.
Yeah, it's just not
Just so
25
people
Right,
understand,
it's
we're
not
not
one
going to load
teacher,
up, it's
right.
not just one teacher,
It's
one
spread
grade.
out.
It's easier to
Yeah.
spread out a bubble when you get to the middle school.
So if, again, did you?
Yeah, with the removal of the teacher, our budget request is down to 1.9% increase over 2014.
Okay.
So the number would be 29,275,439.
That is the lowest we've ever been.
29,275,439.
Correct.
Now, there was also the other question. Sally asked the question regarding the student assistance counselor. And then there was the conversation regarding, what is, in a broader sense, what does guidance do? What do our school psychologists do? So I asked the principals to ask their people. I used the job specs, and I spoke to Rachel Santa about the school psychologist and the social worker, just to make sure I was right. And the others came directly from the people, the guidance counselors, at the different levels. And I also asked Edith Borden if she could, as our student assistance counselor, if she could provide you with an overview of what she
So
does.
the first two regional, we have no control over.
That's correct.
Okay, so we can just skip those.
Oh, we do,
Well, only through you.
right.
But the question was, what would it cost to go from a full-time person?
Yeah, and I think,
to a-
and again, there was some misconception because she was full-time. Let me go back in time. 2009-2010 school year, we had a full-time student assistance counselor at the middle school, Edith, and we had a 2/5 position at the high school. Due to budget constraints, we eliminated the 2/5 high school. We then took Edith and split her between the two schools. So while she was still, working 30 hours, she wasn't working full-time at the middle school. She was working at both schools. So I think there was some, over time, there was some confusion, well, she's not here all the time, so she's part-time.
So I think there were two questions.
Budget-wise,
Right.
she's a full-time contracted service person.
Right.
Cost is approximately $41,000 a year.
Right.
I gave you, or Edith provided, and I forwarded
What
to
she
you
does.
what she does. So,
And the backstory
and
there
also
is,
Sina Franklin, who's here, who's her boss.
Yeah, we got her
provided you-
email.
And I think I forwarded you that email too.
this position originally, we originally contracted out this position because grant money became available?
Originally, yes, it was grant funded.
Originally,
Originally, it was paid for through Title IV, Safe and
The title,
Drug-Free Schools.
I thought it.
Okay.
Then the federal government felt everything's fine, so they pulled that
No more
money
problems,
away.
yeah.
So it was grant money.
And right now, we're very fortunate to have support from the Tiverton Prevention Coalition.
Right,
They're
which
funding this.
came in after 2009.
I think they were partially funding it at that point. The Title IV money that we received was not very much. It certainly didn't cover the whole salary.
So we are or we aren't funding the entire
We're-
41?
We're funding a portion of it, correct?
It's still grant funded.
Does the breakdown, we do, good. Yeah, we still are receiving
Portion of
some.
IDEA, portion locally. and-
Oh, yes, over
Tiverton.
the years, we've done everything possible to fund that position, to maintain that position through other sources. So it is partially grant funded, and what is the?
What portion?
Locally
It's about
funded.
half through IDEA, and then a quarter locally, and a quarter through the coalition.
So give me the local portion.
Local is 10,866.
Now, the IDEA portion, would that be, if you did not have that position, would that be able to go to something else?
It's being paid for out of IDEA set aside, which is called Early Intervening Services.
So yes.
So, yes, we could apply that.
And how much is that?
But it's restrictive, I just
No,
want to
no, I know.
caveat it.
I know.
20,366.
But the question was really, what would it do to restore a part-time or full-time?
That was the question.
Well,
She
that was
asked-
one question. My
Question.
question is, why do we even have it? So
And
we
it-
had two competing questions.
So I'm still missing a piece. 20,000 comes from IDEA funding, which we could choose to apply to
10,000 comes
something
from
else.
us. Yes.
10,000 comes from
The
us,
rest is from the Prevention Coalition.
9,500 Tiverton Prevention Coalition.
and 9,500 is the Prevention Coalition. Okay.
And it's not, my question wasn't not that we don't need it. I think we need student assistance, is do we need that position? Is there overlap?
Right.
That was my question. So we
That's why I
had,
provided
we had
the-
opposite questions.
Right.
Job
Okay.
specs.
And, I mean, there seems to be conceptual overlap, but the job, but what they do seems to be very different.
How so, Jerry?
Well, from my read of the job descriptions, the guidance counselors, social workers, and psychologists have, it seemed, very defined roles vis-à-vis the curriculum and vis-à-vis sort of IEPs and evaluations. And
But we do want to pull out the regional employees.
Yeah, the regional
No,
employees
okay,
are
but
separate.
I'm just sort of saying, we're talking about.
So
four
we're
different-
talking essentially about guidance counselors versus the
So
student
the
assistance
in-house
counselor.
guidance counselors
And
versus
social
the
worker.
contract
And
workers.
there were, so, seemed to be there was the psychologist, the social
Yeah,
worker,
but
guidance counselors.
those aren't even in, because
I know,
they're
but-
regional special ed only.
But
So
if we're
those don't come into
talking about
the,
overlap of job descriptions, the,
well, that we control, we don't control those. And they're just for our special ed population.
so if the question was, what does each person do?
Mm-hmm.
While there was, as I said, conceptual overlap, it seemed that the student assistance counselor had a more community-based role, I mean, community within the student community role, and also a more practical assistive role to the student. But, you know, maybe based on what she gave us, which was, where was that?
It's towards the end of the job.
Yeah, it was towards the end of the job descriptions. This one, it's in a sort of a more of an area.
So student
So the
assistance,
student assistants of TMS,
so basically at risk, which both
Yeah.
the guidance counselor and the middle school counselor both pointed out
Yep.
crisis intervention in their description as well.
yep,
Right.
and
In a school crisis intervention team, both guidance and our school nurses
Attend as well as
Attend those as
RTI meetings, as well as IEP meetings. Those are also attended
Those
by...
are also attended by guidance and school, or the school nurse, depending upon which one you're talking about.
I don't know, Ms. Diaz, Mr. Pazat, could you enlighten us? I mean, they're in your schools, right? This position is in your school.
Well, they're in both schools.
Yeah.
We talk about the crisis intervention team now, and each one has a specific role.
Right.
Whether they're the counselors, I know whether it be a school psychologist or the student assistance counselor, we would depend on them for our in-house diagnosis on whether or not we're making the next step, whether it's just to the family, whether it's to the police, or whether it's a social service agency referral, or to the hospital. So they have to be a core member. So each one of them, they're members of the team, but they'll have specific roles.
But I guess the thing that we're struggling with
What's
is
the
how
difference?
does the student assistance counselor augment the role of the guidance counselor
how does
and those other
Right, how does the student's assistance counselor different
I see her,
than
I
what
see her
what
on
guidance
a daily
does?
basis, and her daily her weekly submissions to me is a consistent provider of substance abuse counseling services to a core group of students and referred students, from counselors, teachers, or administrators. That also carries over to further counseling for family and domestic issues on a regular basis. There's also bereavement groups involved there, so it's family support in addition to the core role is really substance abuse prevention, counseling, referral to further services outside.
And if
Expand on that, we could.
If that position were eliminated, would that job be get done by the guidance counselor or by the social worker or
They
the
probably
psychologist?
need further extended training in substance abuse counseling.
I see the position as a bridge to community resources. East Bay Community Action Program is wonderful as well. And in middle school, we have her 2 days a week. She sees kids usually short-term, very goal-oriented therapy, individual and group. She's dealing with phobias, transition meeting today with Bradley Hospital, transition child in. She's doing a 12 plan. As a bridge to parents, she gets services inside the home. And these are areas that our guidance counselors are not adept at function. They just, that's not part of their functional role. They are really supporting the child academically, and the social piece is all part of that. But the student assistance counselor takes the most critical piece of a child's crisis and manages that so that the child can transition back into his or her academic programs. And sometimes that involves the family. Home visits, phone calls, heads our attendance team with me. She plays a critical role. That position is critical.
Okay.
Rebecca, would you like to say anything about it? Oh, are you? Okay, please do. Yeah, come on.
For those who don't know me, I'm Sina Franklin. I'm the Vice President of Family Development for EBCAP, for East Bay Community Action. I'm Edith's, the Student Assistant Counselor Supervisor.
So we contract with your
Yes, you do.
employer
Yes,
to
you-
provide her
yeah,
services?
That's correct. That's correct, and have for oodles of years, long before I got to EBCAP. The role of guidance counselors and student assistants are very far apart. My understanding, and I'll speak as a parent as well, is guidance counselors really focus on the academics and the learning, and student assistance counselors really provide both a universal service to kids in order to sort of identify who may need more, and then kids who have identified needs. Student assistants, certainly here, both at the middle school and the high school, have really focused on kids who are really vulnerable because they've lost a parent to cancer, because parents are splitting up, kids who have anxiety issues, various mental health issues. I get monthly reports from the Student Assistance Council. I can give you numbers if I was prepared to give you numbers, but you have some of that in your packet. But lots of mental health issues. What we know about kids and their environment, and certainly about Tiverton, is more families are dealing with poverty, more families are dealing with substance abuse. Kids are dealing with many more substance abuse issues, hence Rebecca's involvement with the Prevention Coalition. And these kids come to school not always ready to learn because of all the different socio-emotional issues and family issues that get in the way. And that's the role of student assistants, to help so then kids are ready to learn and prepare them for that. So I see the roles as really different.
So, I mean, I'm hearing conflicting things because
Okay.
our guidance counselors at the high school and the middle school were very clear about the important role that they feel they play in crisis intervention at times on a daily basis. And I seem to be hearing from you that guidance counselors don't really do crisis
Oh, I
intervention.
think everybody
It's
does.
the-
My guess is teachers do crisis intervention, depending on who walks in their classroom as well. But that's all that student assistance focuses on. And we have a number of
well,
kids
but they
who have
also
issues.
do prevention, you said.
Right, there's
substance
the,
abuse
historically, the student assistance counselor here, and at the middle school was trained in the Westchester model, which is an older model. That's what she came in with. And it's a small percentage of sort of macro intervention, which is the Prevention Coalition and being involved in greater student activities in order to identify kids who have needs and in order to be visible so kids feel comfortable talking with her. So that's the smaller, sort of the top of the pyramid, if you will. And then the other work tends to be crisis intervention, if there is, short-term counseling and groups, but so individual and groups. And those are sort of the bigger pieces. So there is a macro piece to it, but the more the work tends to be individual with kids or group, direct service.
And according to this, also co-teaches classes and has advisory, her own advisory
That's
group, which
right.
is not anything to do with crisis, it's just everybody gets
Right.
kids for advisory.
Right.
And the
cur-
Project Alert classes are taught to all kids.
Right, and that's a prevention, that's a prevention focused curriculum,
Yep.
which helps identify and give information,
But
and then
it's-
kids see
again,
her.
it's taught by the health teachers as well.
Yep.
She teaches.
Yep. And that's been my experience in other schools as well, it's team taught. So,
Yeah, I guess I like you, I'm hearing one thing and I'm reading very, very different things, but thank you, Sina.
you're welcome, Greg.
Guidance counselors obviously do crisis intervention. Students assistance counselor gets brought in when, first of all, depending on what the crisis is, the guidance counsel may refer it immediately to the crisis intervention team. Or it may be, depending on what the situation is, the counselor may just need to talk to the parents. It might be, I didn't get my homework in, the teacher's gonna yell at me, I don't wanna go to class, to something as profound as the loss of a relative or whatever. Guidance counselors triage. They do a lot of different things, so they can handle that, but longer term interaction, especially with drugs and alcohol, is where Edith kind of fills a specialty. Okay, so.
Would the state also, I mean, I know we certainly reach out to the state assistance programs as well, social work, child and family services. Okay.
Yeah, depending on what the crisis is.
Right.
And that's where.
So we do have that resource there at the
Yeah,
state
but what
level as
happens
well.
is sometimes if you have a student who's involved, and I'll turn it over to the people who are more, deal with it daily, but guidance counselors, it's not that they're not trained. It's just they simply don't have the time to take a student for 5 days and work with them, or whatever time it is, or to have group sessions on those times. They simply don't have that built into their day. It's not that they can't do it, they just simply really can't do it. Do they do interventions? Absolutely, everybody does. Seen as correct, teachers do, but guidance counselors, they're usually the first point, then Edith's brought in.
So my question is, since this was funded in 1999 through a grant, what did we do before that? Because
Never had it.
several of the districts I was looking at have what they call a student assistance program, and it is run through their guidance department. So I guess it depends on,
With
It
fewer
depends on
people
how
than
big
we
your
have.
population is.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But we have a very
Well,
high.
some
rate.
districts, for example, like
Guidance.
Middletown, augment their guidance counselors with a real
I'm just trying
source.
to,
They
I'm
bring
just trying to
people
get a
in.
sense.
They
Is this
bring in
one
a-
of those things where we had the money, we've had a grant?
We
and-
never-
And, you know, we obviously did something before.
My memory starts at 98,
Oh, okay.
when I was first principal. We didn't have it.
That
There
doesn't
was-
mean
there
we
was-
shouldn't keep it.
No, but I'm
It's
saying,
just what do we
there was
do?
nothing here. It evolved in 99, and that's where we started using those funds for that purpose. I don't know what they did. Steve might be able to answer, because he's been here the longest, and Manny. But there was nothing, at least at the high school,
Yeah,
that
that's
we
fine.
used.
Yeah.
We had contracted agencies that would come in.
Oh, okay, on a contract
On an
basis.
as-needed basis, and right now I can't remember some of the acronyms or the specific names of them, but.
I mean, kind of like,
A number of them are
Yeah.
no longer
Yeah.
in service.
yeah, kind of like we do with the
They're
region.
somewhat dated,
Yeah.
and a
That's
number of
what-
them.
that's what it was.
I
That's
think when
That's us.
you bring up the term crisis,
Yeah.
we all have our roles in a crisis intervention team. They could be intervened at a lower level, a quasi-level of counselor, administrator, contact, reaching out to parents, as an FYI. But once it gets to a health and safety issue
Right.
regarding that student and potential health or life issues, then we need to have either a school psychologist or a licensed student assistance counselor make some diagnostic decisions for us so that we go to the next level of crisis intervention. There's a couple of different levels, and once again, everybody has a different role.
So here's kind of, guys, where, and I get it, and I absolutely understand the difference now, but here's sort of my struggle. We had, in 1999, 810 kids at the middle school, 576 kids now. We had 672 kids at the high school, 541 kids now. That's a 365 student drop in that 1999 to 2014 period. Even between the time that we made the student assistance counselor part-time, we've had another 70 student drop. So we've
Keep-
made no reduction.
No, that's not true, because, not to be contradictory, we had 2 full-time people.
Well, we had a 1 and
No,
2
no, we
fifths,
had-
right?
No, in 9-10, that was the last year we had someone at the high school. We originally.
But it was only a 2/5?
No, right, but originally, when you, the numbers you cited at the beginning, we had 1 at the high school, full-time, 1 at the middle school.
Right, but we're talking about,
No, but in other words, we did, over time, make the,
Right.
reduce.
yep, but since then even, we've had 70.
So 70 have dropped, but you're right, we haven't reduced
I
it
mean,
during that
that's a
period.
large drop, and yet, we've made reductions, we've made teacher reductions. Those weren't easy decisions, but we made them. We've made them at the elementary school, we've made them at the middle school. We're doing it again next year. We're saying we don't need that teacher at the bubble class. Yet, we've had this same, pretty much, level of guidance since 1999. Whether it's guidance counselor, student assistance counselor, I hear what you're saying. So that's my struggle, is that, we've lost that many kids, and I see a lot of overlap, but I understand what they're saying. But, so is it a case of, we don't need a high, since they are primarily academic, can we reduce a middle school guidance counselor? So, that's my struggle, is that's a lot of students that we've lost.
And we know that according to the UCOA data, that we're very
Right.
heavy.
Okay, first of all, the UCOA data.
Well, this
Depending-
year.
But depending on the district you look at, these services are delivered differently. You could have 2 counselors, but you could bring in 3 outside agencies to supplement that. That doesn't show up in guidance in UCOA.
Could be someplace
It could be
else.
contract services. So while it looks low, Middletown, for example, has 2 or 3 people, in addition to 3 counselors,
At the high school
at the high
level.
school. But I'll guarantee you, they only show 3 high school guidance counselors. But they got support that they pay for. And again, depending on the district, unless you know the actual model they're using, that UCOA number, you have to know the history behind it, depending on what
Right.
you're looking at. So you got to keep that in mind. I believe guidance, our kids aren't getting less needy. Our families aren't getting less needy. While the numbers, and they have gone down, obviously, the need is still there. I mean, you come in anytime during the day, the guidance counselors are flat out. Steve and Jack are flat out. Lori's flat out. At the elementary school, some of the things, Manny, I've shared with you,
Yeah.
that we've had to deal
Yep,
with.
yep.
Those things are happening more than ever. And there are a couple of instances where I'm saying, I can't even believe we're dealing with these issues at the elementary level. The need doesn't go away. Our families' needs don't go. We have some families, and Sina talked about it, that are really hurting in our community. And they may be well-to-do financially, but they're hurting because they got issues internally, and their kids bring those issues to school. My recommendation would be, do not touch the guidance staff at any of the grade levels.
And that's fine, and I just think it's our responsibility to look at it.
Of course.
And ask the questions. Because, like I said, we have reduced teaching classes, and we do get these questions. We get these questions from residents,
understood.
we get these questions from parents. So absolutely don't think that it's, it's not always easy sitting up here, but we have the responsibility to look at these things. And I appreciate everyone coming and sort of telling us that, I know it seems like a lot. We've had 350 students, but it's really not, and the need's gotten greater, and they probably do more than they even did 10 years ago. They probably have different responsibilities now just because things shift.
One sample, cyberbullying.
Right.
Facebook has opened up a nightmare for schools to deal with. 10 years ago, not there.
Right.
Sexting, all the issues associated, that whole avenue has created new work.
I think
unfortunately.
I think one of the things I see at the high school is we really encourage everyone to go, certainly if there's a good fit to 2- and 4-year colleges, where maybe 12, 13 years ago.
It was just 4 years.
That might not have been the case, so guidance spends a lot
Yes,
more
they do.
time sort of trying to find a fit for a student who.
Not to mention, students are now applying to 20 colleges where they used to apply to 5 each.
You saw what they said, for example, the average, 3 to 15. And if you've
That's
ever,
what I
and we
mean,
all.
15, yeah, kids will apply to 15 or
I
20.
said the same thing, but that's what they gave me.
You mean they're not like mine, who only says
It's
one
a
and
wide
done?
variable, I guess. But the idea is that they take a lot of time, right?
But no, I appreciate it, guys. I appreciate the feedback, but it really is just, it is our responsibility to ask the questions.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
so
why
I
they're
just-
not- that's why they're not matched.
Yep.
Who might support some of what you're saying. Just prior
I just
to when
gave it
Bill
to-
was principal, and actually Manny was assistant principal here.
I know,
there were
I
3
do.
administrators
I haven't
in this
learned.
high school. There are no longer 3 administrators.
See, that could-
Well, so we've made that cut too.
So
We
we
made,
made-
we've made
Well,
cut
the
in
cut-
administrators,
the cut
we made
goes
cut
to
in
the
teaching,
guidance
which is
staff.
why we sort of
which
looked.
is why we're looking
But
at
the
this.
Superintendent moved the administrative position into a guidance position.
That's
So
the
he could
current
say,
chair.
Tell the
Oh.
budget committee that he cut an administrator.
So
It
that,
was a cut.
that's correct.
It was a reduction, all in the amount of.
And that
time
person
administrators
didn't
worked
handle kids.
But I can
They didn't
just,
have a caseload.
At all.
I can just say that I
We've
can.
also lost an alternative education program teacher.
Oh, that's right, we
Right,
did.
had that.
In the early 2000s.
Teachers, we had 2.
And we've also lost a long-standing in-house remediation program teacher.
As did
that
the middle
was here.
school.
All of that, to a degree, is absorbed through guidance in our office
Okay.
right now.
Okay, so when my children were here, we had all those things at the high school. So now I can defend this position anywhere in the community and to anyone that wants to talk to me. Because I go every month to the Tiverton Prevention Coalition and have been for years. And I've seen what's happening, what everyone's talking about. Let's talk about the kneecaps the pressure puts on the parents, the students, and everybody else. Things we never had before. And I'm alarmed, and that's why, as a parent, all I ever wanted to know was that things were being taken care of. Are you addressing the problem? So if someone needs the latest statistics that came out, whether they're true or not, and they go, this is ridiculous, what are you doing about it? They say to me, do you have a student assistance counselor? First question from the Herald News, I said, yes, we do. That was in Rebecca's article, and people want to know, we're not denying these problems, we're facing what we have. A lot of places make believe everything's wonderful, we don't need these people. That's not true. These kids need us, and we need to provide for them. And Carol, you always say to them, and I think it's beautiful, what can we do to help you? That's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard her say in all these years. And this is one of the things we have to do to help these parents and these kids that are going through this. And I'm very passionate about it because I see every month the report she comes in and gives.
Excuse
So
me.
Rebecca?
Yes, well, that's my next question, and it's going to be directed to you, Rebecca, as well. Since this was grant-funded in the past, and the position, as we've heard, does involve a lot of substance abuse prevention, and since we have been fortunate to get additional money through the Prevention Coalition, is there any chance you would be able to fund more of the position than you currently do?
That's not the point that I came up to make. I really
Meet the press.
I really have a question, and as honestly as possible. Part of the grant money that we previously used to fund that $9,500, and we've been putting that out there. I've been with the coalition over 10 years, I think 12, and I've been with the school as an employee starting 10 years ago. That $9,500 used to come from state funding that we no longer get. So we've replaced that with some of the federal funding that we now receive with some of the larger grant. That grant runs out, we're in year 3 of 5 years. So although there's grant money there for a couple more years, I'm really reluctant to put additional grant funding to replace district funding. And when that goes away,
we'll be having this discussion again. Absolutely.
Except it'll be a greater number.
Right. So that's, so putting it out, I think all things are negotiable. I would be reluctant to put more coalition funding in to get the same result. Now, if you all want to bring to the table an increase in that position, I think then we could have a different discussion about that. If we were talking about increasing the number of hours, and it's, you can't really increase the number of manpowers, you almost have to add a different person to the mix, because you could have somebody here 40 hours, but if no students are in the school building, it doesn't, it's kind of a moot point. So that's always, call me and we can have that conversation about how that might fit into the grant. The point that I did come up to make, though, excuse me, and no offense to anybody that put the packet together and put the job descriptions in, as I look at what you have for job descriptions for student assistance and guidance, I do see on paper a lot of overlap, and there does appear to be some redundancy. So if your only exposure to it is just those job descriptions, I could see someone walking away and saying, there's a lot of overlap here and there are less students. On a practical matter, I think those roles are so different that it's almost not even reflected in the job descriptions as they're presented. The overlap doesn't exist practically on a daily basis in the way that it does perhaps on paper. Yes, they're members of the same crisis team, and yes, whoever sort of gets the kid in front of them first starts that process, and the crisis policy comes into play at that point. Yes, if a kid is in distress, emotional distress, and they go to see a guidance counselor, their needs are going to be met until the guidance counselor can, move them over to the student assistance counselor, who can then spend the amount of time that it's going to take to get that kid back to a position where they're ready to go back into a classroom. We have kids that come into the building, and I can speak to the high school, and I'm assuming it's the same at the middle school, I know that it is, on a daily basis, who are dealing with adult struggles. They're in distress. Their families are, perhaps maybe chaotic. Maybe they've just moved to the district because they're now living with a grandparent or changing this custodial situation of a parent. So we've got kids that are coming in not necessarily ready to go into a classroom and participate in learning. Not only are they in distress, but when they get into that classroom, now it becomes a teacher's responsibility to sort of figure out, what's going on with this kid who's not in a position to learn, and is that a disruption of the other students around them? So there needs to be, that opportunity to meet that child's needs. Sometimes that means guidance. Sometimes that means student assistance, whoever is the most readily available at that moment to deal with it. Generally, when the student assistance counselor is here, because we split between the two buildings, for a little bit more of the long-term, and I don't mean long-term as in forever, but I mean several meetings worth of time will be devoted to that student by the student assistance counselor. I'll give you a sort of a very quick day in the life. It happened very recently. I consult for another district. on prevention matters. So this did not happen here. Has nothing to do with a Tiverton student at all. A full day of the student assistance counselor in the last month was spent with a child who has an eating disorder and had suicidal ideation. An entire day was spent with that child, gathering the information that was required, giving the support that was required in order to get that kid into a safe environment. The safe environment happened to be Bradley Hospital. If it were not for that student assistance counselor, would someone have done that? Absolutely. It would have been probably a guidance counselor, would have picked up that issue, working alongside the administrators, the school nurse, as part of that crisis team. A guidance counselor in January is, as every mother, father knows, what guidance counselors do with letters of recommendation, college applications, et cetera, et cetera. If a full day of a full work day was spent meeting the needs, the critical needs of that child, that work stays left on the table for the guidance counselor. And I don't want to be over dramatic. I think saving someone's life is always going to trump someone's college application. However, if you're a kid waiting on a deadline, the deadline is tomorrow, and your guidance counselor is dealing with one of those heavy-duty kinds of things, that's a critical situation for that other child as well. So I think that when we talk about redundancy in the roles, I think there's a piece that we have to look at that's really the time. Can the guidance counselor do it? Yes. Perhaps. Are they doing those kinds of interventions? Yes, on a shorter term basis. But when it comes to really, is it their main purpose when they walk through the door for guidance counselor to meet the social emotional needs? Probably not. They're really here to meet those academic needs. So I think, sorry, that was kind of more long-winded than I expected, but I really do think we have to be cautious about looking at the job descriptions on paper and assuming there's that much overlap.
I'd just like to
Thank you.
say, again, those aren't job descriptions per se. Carol asked for 5
You were
bullets.
just telling us what they do.
Right, and they were very effusive. I mean, I left out pages. For your sake, I only gave you what you gave. So.
And again, no criticism. I
No.
think that it's a good summary of what they do. But I think when you try to dovetail them
It's
together.
like any job. It's like anything. Your job description is one thing, then doing it, is another.
Well, so what I hear is, Superintendent, that yourself and definitely the principals feel this is a very different position, so they would not
And
want to
that
see
we-
that eliminated. And what I hear from you personally is, as far as your guidance staff, you feel you need the
Yes.
level of coverage that you have,
Otherwise, I would have,
correct?
yes.
Okay.
Otherwise, I would have made the recommendation to reduce.
Well, yes, but.
It's good to ask them,
Yep.
yeah, okay,
Yes, officially,
That's,
on
I'm
the
just,
record.
that's what I'm getting.
okay.
So what I will do is I will send the amended, what we proposed to the Budget Committee. I'll then show it to everybody at our next meeting, what we did, so we can see the same slides, but with the changes made. And then we just wait for our meetings with the Budget Committee, unless we want to tinker with, the proposal, but I think it being at 1.9.
Might you want to make a formal motion for the amended amount?
Yes, that would probably be.
What was it, Doug?
$29,275,439.
I'll make a recommendation, or a motion that we approve sending a recommendation of $29,275,439 forward to the Budget Committee.
It's 104.
Second? Anybody have any
439?
questions?
Could you just
See,
repeat?
Deb said
29 million.
$29,275,439?
439.
29,275,439.
Thank you.
Which is a
1.9.
1.9%.
Increase.
1.9%.
Okay, I second it. Anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All those in favor?
Under announcements, again, I can't remember who mentioned it. Deb, Sally, Steve, myself, and Diane went to one of 2 RIDE meetings on the update on when are we going to get the results for our at-risk seniors. We kind of had hoped that we would get the scores at that meeting. We did not. We were told.
We were, however, treated like kindergartners. It was insulting.
It was a very, I don't think it was overly productive. We did find.
What a nice way to say it.
We did find, we are on TV. We did find out that we will be getting the scores.
Yes.
We hope, January 25th. There'll be a week's window where we will begin notifying our students and their parents. Hopefully, it's good news to say you showed growth or you got to 2. If not, we then implement or begin the implementation of our waiver policy. So we're going to catch those kids. Retakes are in the first week in March for those students who don't have bank scores, whether they're college acceptance letters. An ASVAB cut score now is included. If they get the minimum that the military takes, they're banked, so they wouldn't have to take it in March. So March is the 3rd time. Then the question was asked, when will we get those results? That kind of stumped everybody.
April-ish.
Late April-ish. It did.
They don't know.
Honest to goodness, it did. Someone asked. They went around like a semicircle, no one had an answer.
April-ish.
And it was a required meeting. If districts didn't go, we were told we would not get our kneecap scores. So we assumed, okay, you're going to give us the kneecap scores since you're making us go. But no scores, but we went. And that's my update on that big meeting. The second meeting actually is tonight, I believe. It was tonight.
Do we have a sense of this new change in the waiver policy that we were told about that night? How many kids that affected?
Right now, it affected 3 immediately.
Which is good.
And then we'll just be tracking now college acceptance letters like the stock report.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Bezat, for all your work and your staff.
And they will become very similar to bank scores now.
Right. Do you have an idea how many of our students who are at risk of not showing that kneecap growth have applied to colleges?
I don't have that number right now, but I guess we're probably at around 30 to 32, and I would say we're probably looking at about a third of those students
Have applied?
have not applied.
Oh, have
Some
not.
others have probably applied to some form, but it may not be your non-rolling enrollment kind of college. It could be New England Tech, it could be BCC, CCRI to come, because they can be accepted on a continuum.
The rolling basis, yeah.
I did talk to a few
So
parents.
it's the rolling basis schools that doesn't count.
That's correct.
But is it,
Will not count.
I thought it had to be selective. In other words, there are some, especially very large universities, which have rolling admission. You submit your application, and as long as you have a minimum GPA and minimum SAT scores, you get in. That's still a selective college.
Right, 'cause they don't
even though
take
they
everyone.
have rolling admissions.
True.
The criteria.
Their definition is, they used, and I don't think it was a great one, they kept talking about like a CCRI.
A non-open enrollment.
It's
Yeah.
really whether it's open enrollment or not. I
Right.
don't think whether it's rolling admission
either.
is the criteria.
No, it's not rolling admission, it's
Whether it's open enrollment or
In other words,
not.
we'll take, if you got the check, we'll take you.
Right.
And again, as Sally said and Deb pointed out, how many kids were put off by that, who did, I mean, I don't think we'll ever know that, but.
Did you wanna
I
say
know
something?
personally several parents who,
I was gonna
the
say.
kids waited
Yeah,
to apply to college because they wanted to see what their kneecap score was.
right. That's right.
Had they known this, they certainly would have started the
They would've
process
So
earlier.
it's
but-
going to be.
But that's, it's only a couple,
And we were
but
talking about guidance counselors, this is another thing they'll be, involved
they'll be
in.
doing.
Because Rod recommended that, you have a quiet place when you give them the news. I mean, not like we didn't do this last year. So,
I have a couple of announcements also, if I might. At the middle school, we're pleased to announce that we'll have after-school math programs. It's being called by Mrs. Dias. Time for Math, it'll be after-school math intervention for grades 5 through 8. And Jim Corney, Karen Thomas, Eileen Nugent, Luann Pauls, and Kristen Despreps will be providing that tutoring for students. So
Just-
we're happy to be able to
So it's
offer that.
tutoring.
can you explain
So-
where the
and
money is
so-
coming from?
And this is through grant carryover. Earlier, we referenced that IDEA. It's through those early intervening service funds, so we were happy to be able to use the money in that way. We also found out recently that we've been awarded a grant to continue our work with the ELA curriculum, and this is through the Rhode Island Department of Education, and the value for us is about $10,000. We applied for this grant in collaboration with
We'll take it.
Warren, who we're also doing the curriculum with. And then another grant award that we found out about a little while ago, but I was waiting for all of the details, is a math science partnership grant. Also came out through the state. We were one of several districts to apply, and there's a large collaboration of districts that will be participating in some professional development this summer. Other East Bay districts include Bristol, Warren, Portsmouth, Barrington, and Newport, and it involves 10 days of intensive professional development for a cohort of teachers focused on math and another cohort of teachers focused on science. And then there's some follow-up sessions during the year. And after the intensive professional development, teachers will develop and implement some model lessons. Those who are willing to will be videotaped. And the goal in the end is to provide a series of online professional development modules that will be available to all teachers in the state. So we're happy to have that extra funding and that support and professional development for teachers.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Fran?
I have one. I was going to announce that I had applied for a Feinstein grant for $10,000 for signage in front of our school. And I'm very happy to announce that I can now announce that we were accepted it this afternoon. And
that's
all
good
the
news.
sign-ups.
So double good news. We're applying and we received the grant, so.
Wait till we hear about DEM.
Oh, and Doug's got to,
The big news.
he's very proud of himself.
Well, I am.
I am too, but
Included in the package was some recent correspondence from DEM with regard to what they were looking for in order for us to close out our project. And this evening I handed out, I'm not sure if the committee had a chance to look at it, but we over the holidays, we got DEM everything they needed working with our engineer, and they've issued a release of our notice of violation, which promulgated the entire process. And what was unanticipated was they gave us credit for funds that we had spent on a new project, and they've released the penalty against us of $61,500, which wasn't expected. So the attorney was very pleased with that, and I'd like to thank everyone that contributed to that process.
Good.
So the DEM letter's included in your package.
so we got the seal of approval
That's good
for the
news.
project, and
And it's finally
they
done.
waived the fines.
That's wonderful. Yes, Mr. Pazette?
The high school will be at the Rhode Island Boat Show later this month.
That's right.
Oh, yay.
The Career Education Department, Mr. Phillips, Mr. Fenster, and also Mrs. Larson has coordinated the efforts to have a group of students up there showcasing the boat building program and the engineering program.
Super.
That's
The last
wonderful.
weekend in January, as you go up to upgrade the watercraft for the summer.
Yeah,
As I go to look for my yacht.
I might have to live on one once my kid.
And
They have houseboats?
And the last one is, last night, the auditor came to the town council to present the audit, and he was complimenting both the treasurer and Mr. Fiore for such a wonderful job that they did. He said everything went smoothly, and we both had a surplus, so that was good news.
When are we going to get a look at that?
I've got copies of the audit for the committee. We can bring them to the next meeting.
We just wanted to do the budget.
Debbie will have so much fun with it.
I look at the other side as much as ours.
Okay?
That's it.
Anything else? That's it?